Chapter 161. Nagini. I feel. I'm getting weird. Long time no see, Nagini. A gentle voice greeted as Nagini followed Blake through the portal. The voice was somewhat familiar, yet it carried a weight of years she didn't remember. Standing at the door to welcome them were Dumbledore and Newt Scamander. Long time no see, Professor Dumbledore and Mr. Scamander, Nagini said, her voice tinged with mild surprise. A severe sense of dissonance washed over her. The snake soul within her recognized them, yet did not know them, while her human soul remembered but had never seen them. This peculiar blend of memories made them seem both strange and familiar. It's a weird feeling, Nagini confessed. It's as if we parted just yesterday, and yet... She struggled to articulate the surreal experience of meeting someone after what felt like a day, only to find them aged, as if time had ruthlessly stolen moments from her life. Yes, time has indeed passed for all of us, Dumbledore remarked with a gentle smile. Let's go inside and talk, Newt suggested, opening the door to the wooden house. T, with his silver hair, appeared, inviting them in. I've prepared some dessert. Let's enjoy it while we chat. At the mention of dessert, Blake's eyes sparkled with excitement, eager to follow. However, Dumbledore halted him with a question. Professor Snape just informed me that you missed your potions class again this afternoon. Blake, caught off guard, tried to recall. Potions class this afternoon? I don't remember, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Dumbledore gave him a stern look. How can you continually miss classes? Remember, you are still a student. I just forgot. Okay, Blake admitted, throwing up his hands. I just don't want to attend Snape's class. I can't stand the sight of him. He gets so angry. He looks like he might explode, and I feel uncomfortable just seeing his scowl. I bet he's thrilled every time I skip his class. Dumbledore massaged his forehead, exasperated. And what about your potions grades? Blake was quick to defend his academic prowess. He grades me fairly during finals. I've taught myself everything I know. My mastery of potions is sufficient for my studies and will only improve with time. So what's the point of attending class? Dumbledore's tone was firm. Attendance is non-negotiable. Skipping classes cannot be justified by your current level of skill. We cannot allow you to waste your time, providing an opportunity for Grindelwald to exploit. Blake sighed, but Dumbledore continued, puzzled by Blake's relationship with Snape. I thought you two had reconciled. How could you think that? Blake asked, genuinely surprised. Dumbledore explained, Professor Snape mentioned your last meeting. You made a deal involving Phoenix Tears, did you not? Blake clarified, business is business. It has nothing to do with personal feelings. Dumbledore chuckled. But if you can conduct business without reconciling, it's an interesting dynamic. Blake insisted. It's different. I asked for his help, and it was a transaction, not a gesture of friendship. Dumbledore frowned, still trying to understand Blake's logic. It seems we have different views on this matter. The conversation shifted away from personal grievances, focusing instead on the reason for their gathering. As they moved inside to enjoy T's desserts, the atmosphere lightened, leaving the complexities of their relationships momentarily behind. Regardless of your relationship with him, you must attend class, Dumbledore insisted. If the school allows a student to skip class every day without consequence, it sets a poor example for the others. Dumbledore subtly hinted that exploiting one's status to bypass rules was unacceptable. Blake sighed in resignation. All right, I promise I won't miss any more classes. You must keep your word. I'll have Miss Abbott keep an eye on you. If you skip a class, she'll report directly to me. Dumbledore played his ace, knowing Blake would take the warning seriously upon mentioning Han, not Abbott. Blake, feeling cornered, retorted, Fine, I surrender. Snape, you've been tattling, haven't you? So you want me in your class that badly? Well, I'll make sure the next potions class is unforgettable. Despite his frustration, Blake planned his return to school. Where are you going? Dumbledore inquired. Back to potions class, Blake replied. You do realize that class has already ended. Come, join us for dessert instead, Dumbledore offered, changing the subject. Dessert? Yay! Blake's mood lifted at the mention of sweets, even though the atmosphere was somber due to recent events. Nagini, sitting quietly to the side, had been briefed by Dumbledore and Newt about the tragic outcomes of recent battles. The realization that many familiar faces were gone forever was overwhelming for her, akin to waking up to find everything and everyone she cared about had vanished. It was a devastating blow, especially for Nagini, who was still emotionally fragile. Observing Nagini's grief, Dumbledore led Blake to a wooden gazebo outside. "How did you manage to bring Nagini back?" he asked, curious about the method Blake used, as his letter had left out the details. "The principle is quite simple, Professor," Blake began, recalling a past experiment that had earned him a reprimand from Dumbledore. "A person without self-awareness cannot transform their body. I confirmed this with an experiment on Bob, which led me to believe that Nagini's human consciousness was dormant. Without consciousness, she couldn't revert to her human form or recall her human memories. So, I took 2 steps. First, I extracted her soul from the snake form, which, as you know, I can do. Second, I awakened her human consciousness. Once her consciousness was restored, she naturally reverted to her human form," Blake explained. Dumbledore pondered this, then asked, "But this doesn't fully lift her blood curse, does it?" "Indeed," Blake acknowledged, his expression turning serious. "Those afflicted by the blood curse can appear human by day, but are dominated by their beastly nature when unconscious, transforming into beasts. Nagini is fine for now, but she must constantly rest. The moment she falls asleep, she reverts to a snake." Surprised by Blake's insight, Dumbledore wondered where he had acquired such knowledge. The thought of Grindelwald crossed his mind, but he pressed on. "How did you awaken her consciousness? Can this method be applied repeatedly?" Dumbledore was concerned that Blake's solution might be temporary, offering Nagini only fleeting moments of humanity. "It's not a one-time solution," Blake reassured. "I can awaken her every day." Relieved, Dumbledore sighed, grateful that Nagini's situation, though complex, had a glimmer of hope thanks to Blake's intervention. Blake stood before Dumbledore, his expression serious as he explained his method for awakening Nagini. "It's emotion, Professor. Extreme emotion," Blake said, emphasizing the importance of strong feelings in reaching the soul. Dumbledore, intrigued, pondered the concept. "Extreme emotions can indeed have a profound impact on the soul," he mused, considering Blake's approach to penetrate the protective layer surrounding Nagini's soul. Unbeknownst to Dumbledore, Blake had acquired this knowledge through illicit means, specifically from Voldemort's Horcruxes. However, Dumbledore chose not to press the matter, suspecting Grindelwald's influence, but not wanting to embarrass Blake by probing too deeply into the source of his knowledge. Blake then elaborated on his plan, albeit not entirely truthfully. He couldn't very well admit to massaging Nagini's soul to stir her emotions. Instead, he offered a more palatable explanation involving his bond with Nagini in her snake form and the happiness derived from their interactions. Dumbledore, aware of Blake's unique affinity for animals, accepted this explanation without question. The conversation shifted to the possibility of separating Nagini's animal soul from her human soul, a notion Blake initially considered but instinctively felt might lead to dire consequences. Dumbledore affirmed Blake's reservations, highlighting the complexity of the soul and the potential risks of such a division. He also reminded Blake that the blood curse's intricacies extended beyond the soul, involving the bloodline as well. This realization made Blake reconsider his approach, acknowledging that resolving the blood curse would be a more arduous journey than anticipated. Meanwhile, Nagini's dual existence as human by day and snake by night continued, raising concerns about the long-term effects of their unconventional method of awakening her. Despite these challenges, Dumbledore consented to Blake bringing Nagini back to Hogwarts, where she was kept in the Room of Requirement, housed within the same suitcase Newt had given Blake. Each morning, Blake would awaken Nagini's consciousness through his unique method, allowing her to enjoy her human form during the day. Nagini cherished these moments, spending her time engaging in human activities and seeking solace in the books within Blake's suitcase. However, as time passed, Nagini began to sense that something was amiss. Each morning, after being awakened by Blake's power, she experienced an inexplicable sense of longing, a feeling of unfulfilled joy that seemed to emanate from the depths of her being. Despite the awkwardness of admitting it, Nagini couldn't deny the profound pleasure and happiness she felt from their morning rituals, a joy that seemed to resonate from her very soul. In the depths of her soul, Nagini had never fully experienced the extent of Blake's extraordinary abilities. However, the lingering sensations from when she was last awakened by him left her curious, and a daring thought crossed her mind. What if Blake could use his unique ability on her again, but this time while she was fully conscious? The mere idea sent a flush of excitement through her, but she immediately chastised herself for even considering such a request. It was far too audacious to ask of Blake, so she kept her desires to herself. Yet, Nagini's emotional turmoil was palpable, and it was impossible to conceal from Blake, especially with his advanced system and his proficiency in legilimency. He had already noticed the fluctuations in her mood and realized that Nagini was, in fact, intrigued by his abilities. One day, after awakening Nagini, Blake noticed her hesitant expression once more. He sighed softly, trying to ease into the conversation. Professor Dumbledore mentioned that the blood curse might be linked to your bloodline. Perhaps when you're fully awake and your soul is present, I could attempt my technique again. There's no need to be nervous. Consider it a minor experiment. Nagini's cheeks flushed with color. Did he understand her inner turmoil? Yet, Blake's demeanor remained calm and composed, showing no sign of judgment or discomfort. Encouraged by his reassurance, she nodded in agreement. A minute later, they were in Blake's magical suitcase. Nagini sat on a chair, sweating profusely, and her pupils dilated in anticipation. Blake, noticing her discomfort, asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Nagini muttered, avoiding his gaze. "Could you step outside for a moment?" "Pardon?" Blake was momentarily puzzled. "I need to change my clothes," she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ah, of course. My apologies," Blake said as he climbed out of the suitcase, giving her the privacy she requested. Once outside, Blake noticed an additional golden treasure chest in his system space, which made him scratch his head in wonder. Could it be that my magic was too potent this time? He mused, pondering the unexpected outcome of their experiment. Chapter 162, Voldemort. Blake, you are just like me back then. After Blake emerged from the suitcase, Nagini found herself curled up on the armchair, feeling a mix of exhaustion and relief. She bit her lip, and with a tail that seemed to have lost its strength, wiped the sweat from her forehead. Completely drenched, she realized she didn't have a change of clothes. Just then, the suitcase opened again, and a bag floated in, landing directly on the table in front of her. Blake's voice followed. "I should have given this to you yesterday. I was too busy and forgot. I, Mrs. Toscamander, have prepared some clean clothes for you. Oh, by the way, there's a bathroom in the cabin behind you if you want to wash up." After Blake finished speaking, he closed the suitcase. A warm feeling blossomed in Nagini's heart. She hadn't expected such thoughtfulness from him. In the evening, Xiao Bai, Blake's pet, confronted him with a fierce meow. Blake, puzzled, sat down at the long table and asked, "What's the matter, Xiao Bai?" The cat's blue eyes stared suspiciously at Blake, as if accusing him of carrying an unfamiliar scent. Blake, unfazed, picked up Xiao Bai and gently calmed him down, despite the cat's initial resistance. After a while, Xiao Bai relaxed completely in Blake's arms. As Blake enjoyed a snack, he noticed two peculiar figures approaching. They were unmistakably green from head to toe, a sight so bizarre that Blake joked, "If you weren't wearing Gryffindor's school uniforms, I'd think you were dryads." The surrounding classmates couldn't help but stare at the odd duo, Fred and George Weasley, who had somehow turned themselves green. "Why did this happen?" Blake asked, bewildered. "It's that drop of viper bile. It shouldn't have been in the potion," one of them lamented. "No matter how we adjust the formula, we can't reverse the effect," the other added, both looking utterly dejected. Blake, realizing the cause of their predicament, couldn't help but laugh. "Did you eat your own experimental spicy snacks?" he asked. The twins confirmed, explaining their failed attempt to replicate a Muggle snack, which resulted in their current green state. Blake tried to offer some comfort, suggesting they visit the school hospital, only to learn that Madame Pomfrey had already seen them and declared they'd remain green for 3 days. Sympathizing with their plight, Blake offered them some of his special snacks, which, unlike ordinary Muggle treats, contained slight magical enhancements, including the ability to boost happiness. Fred and George, unable to resist the allure of these magical snacks, eagerly accepted Blake's offer, grateful for the reprieve from their self-inflicted misery. Blake observed the disheartened expressions of Fred and George with a touch of sympathy. In a gesture of generosity, he took out 2 packets of David Dragon's spicy strips and tossed them to the twins. Their reaction was immediate and synchronized. They opened the packets and took a bite, their faces lighting up with recognition and relief. "Ah, that's the taste," they murmured, contemplating a future potentially devoid of such delights. "What if we can't enjoy these anymore?" Despite their initial gloom, smiles finally broke through on their faces. Ding! 2 joyful emotions detected. The system's voice chimed in Blake's mind, followed by, "Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining 2 silver treasure chests." Blake couldn't help but look at Fred and George, bewildered. Was it really such a big deal? It was just 2 packets of spicy strips, after all. Granted, these were produced by the system, and their flavor was far superior to ordinary ones, but it wasn't as if they were consuming something as bland as plain flour. Nonetheless, the acquisition of 2 silver treasure chests was a pleasant surprise. Setting aside the puffs he was eating, Blake asked, "Do you enjoy these kinds of snacks?" "Of course," Fred exclaimed, with George adding, "It's not just the spicy strips, but also little fat sheep, big white rabbits, crispy noodles, wong snow cakes. The snacks you've shared with everyone. They're incredible." Blake hadn't given it much thought when he distributed the snacks previously. His reputation for generosity had already spread, so it wasn't unusual for him to receive treasure chests now and then. However, he hadn't realized that the joy his snacks brought was directly responsible for these rewards. It was an oversight he hadn't noticed until now. This revelation sparked an idea in Blake. Rather than giving away these treats for free, which people might not value as much, he considered selling them. By offering them at a fair price and in limited quantities, he could ensure a steady stream of low-level treasure chests and perhaps even make a profit. Fred and George watched Blake's expression shift from contemplation to a sly smile, which made them instinctively take a step back, recalling a previous occasion when they were duped by that same kind smile. Just as they were about to make their escape, Blake's hands firmly grasped their shoulders. "In the future, do you still want to enjoy such delicious snacks?" Blake asked, his smile widening. "Definitely." The twins nodded in unison. "Then you're in luck," Blake announced. "I plan to source these snacks and sell them to you. This way you can enjoy them anytime." Fred interjected, "But last time, it was so expensive." "I assure you the prices will be fair this time," Ismail Blake promised. "I'm looking to establish a long-term business, which means maintaining high quality at low prices." Fred and George's excitement was palpable. Their keen business sense told them this could be a sustainable source of their favorite snacks. Previously, they had assumed Blake's snacks were limited-time treats from the Muggle world, but now there was hope for continuous enjoyment. "Let us handle the sales of the snacks," they proposed eagerly. "We'll take a small commission as our reward." Blake shook his head, his fingers wagging. "Selling them just to you two is too small scale. This venture is beyond just the 2 of you walking around." Blake, intrigued by the idea of opening a canteen at Hogwarts, shared his ambitious plan with Fred and George, who were initially skeptical. They couldn't believe Blake was serious about establishing a store within the school, especially one that specialized in Chinese cuisine. However, Blake, known for his determination and resourcefulness, was undeterred by their doubts. He was motivated by the prospect of tapping into an untapped market within Hogwarts, especially since his recent ventures hadn't been as profitable as he'd hoped. As Blake made his way to the headmaster's office, his cat Xiaobai playfully followed, leaping onto his shoulder in a show of support. Along the way, he encountered Professor Quirrell, who, under the guise of his timid exterior, sought Blake's company for the evening. Despite his initial reluctance, Blake saw an opportunity to delve deeper into Voldemort's plans, potentially leveraging this knowledge for his own gain. Agreeing to meet, Blake followed Quirrell to a secluded classroom, the same one where he had previously been taught the gut ejaculation curse. In the dimly lit room, Quirrell, now revealing a more composed demeanor indicative of Tom Riddle's influence, offered Blake a drink. Opting for simplicity, Blake accepted a cup of warm, sweetened pumpkin juice, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed. The conversation that ensued was far from ordinary. Quirrell, or rather Tom Riddle, expressed a genuine interest in Blake's well-being, a stark contrast to the fearful figure he usually presented. Blake, sensing the shift in Quirrell's persona, played along, adopting a facade of vulnerability. He portrayed himself as a conflicted soul, torn between gratitude towards Dumbledore for rescuing him from an orphanage and resentment towards the headmaster's overbearing nature. This confession struck a chord with Tom, who saw parallels between Blake's experiences and his own past. Tom empathized with Blake, sharing his understanding of the young wizard's inner turmoil. The conversation revealed not just the complexities of Blake's character, but also hinted at a deeper connection between him and Tom Riddle. Despite the apparent camaraderie, Blake remained cautious, aware of the dangerous game he was playing. He recognized the importance of gaining Tom's trust, not as a means to an end, but as a strategic move in the intricate chess game that was life at Hogwarts. Even though Tom had become the most exemplary student at Hogwarts, adored by both teachers and students alike, he still couldn't earn Dumbledore's trust. The headmaster had been wary of him from the moment he set foot in the school, a suspicion that only deepened after the incident with the basilisk. This situation reminded Tom of Blake, who was currently in a similar position. Blake was intelligent, talented, and popular among his peers, yet he too failed to secure Dumbledore's confidence. Tom remembered the look of distrust in Dumbledore's eyes when Blake had openly criticized Snape and had impressed everyone at the dueling club. It was a look Tom knew all too well from his own experiences. Tom couldn't help but see this as an opportunity. In his view, Dumbledore's approach to education was laughable. When Dumbledore had first visited him in the orphanage, he had preached about the dangers of using power for personal gain. Yet, in the same breath, he had used his own power to intimidate Tom, setting his closet ablaze and forcing him to apologize to the children he had bullied. It was the most vivid lesson Tom had ever received, teaching him a crucial lesson. With enough strength, one could compel others to act against their will, just as Dumbledore had done to him. This realization had shaped Tom's understanding of power and its uses. He saw Dumbledore's actions not as guidance, but as a demonstration of raw power, forcing him to make amends to those he considered beneath him. It was a lesson in strength and dominance, one that Tom would never forget. Chapter 163, Dumbledore's Warning. Dumbledore leaned forward, his eyes twinkling behind his half-moon glasses. Next time you seek personal gain, could you perhaps choose a moment when we're alone? His voice carried a mix of amusement and reprimand, a gentle reminder of the discretion often required in their world. Blake, standing before Dumbledore, couldn't help but reflect on his recent encounter with Voldemort. Unlike Tom Riddle, Blake had experienced a somewhat happier childhood in the orphanage, thanks to Mrs. Marianne's presence. This difference in their pasts made Blake question why Tom had resorted to using his magical powers to bully others. It was a path Blake himself found incomprehensible. Voldemort, sensing Blake's silence, intensified his persuasion. "Blake, you are endowed with remarkable magical talent," he began, his voice smooth and coaxing. "Such talent should not be constrained by any means. You were born strong and should be the master of your own destiny. To do otherwise would be a tragic waste of your abilities." Despite Voldemort's compelling words, Blake felt a surge of anger at the mention of Dumbledore. "Professor, you shouldn't speak to me like that," Blake retorted, his loyalty to Dumbledore shining through. "Professor Dumbledore took me in and saved me from despair. Even if he imposes certain restrictions, I believe it's for my own good." Apologizing, Blake made to leave, assuring Voldemort that their conversation would remain a secret. Yet Voldemort's next words halted him. "Are you truly content?" he probed, tempting Blake with the promise of untold power that Dumbledore would never reveal. Blake paused, visibly torn. Voldemort's words struck a chord, igniting a conflict within him. The allure of greater power was tempting, yet the thought of betraying Dumbledore was unbearable. Voldemort watched Blake's struggle with a satisfied smile. He had anticipated this reaction, understanding that Blake's loyalty to Dumbledore was a significant barrier. Yet, he also knew that Blake's desire for knowledge particularly of the dark arts, was a vulnerability he could exploit. "How is seeking power a betrayal?" Voldemort challenged, skillfully weaving his argument. "Everyone pursues their desires, be it wealth, power, or beauty. Why should your quest for strength be any different?" Blake's silence spoke volumes. The internal battle was evident on his face, a testament to Voldemort's persuasive skills. Yet, despite the temptation, Blake's loyalty to Dumbledore remained a formidable obstacle. Voldemort, confident in his understanding of human nature, believed that no one could resist the allure of dark magic forever. "You're not betraying Dumbledore, you're merely pursuing your rightful desires," he insisted, trying to reshape Blake's perspective. As Blake wrestled with his conscience, Voldemort knew he had made progress. The fact that Blake hesitated, that he had considered keeping their conversation from Dumbledore, was a sign of the young wizard's internal conflict. In the end, Dumbledore's earlier words echoed in Blake's mind, a reminder of the complex web of loyalty, power, and morality he had to navigate. The choice between the dark allure of power and the steadfast loyalty to a mentor who had become like family was not an easy one. But for now, Blake's heart knew where his allegiance lay. Tonight's conversation was revealing. Voldemort could see the reluctance in Blake's eyes when discussing the renunciation of power and the avoidance of dark magic. It was a look he recognized all too well. It mirrored his own determination from years past, a vow made to never be overpowered by anyone else. The similarity between his past self and Blake was uncanny. "Take your time to ponder these matters after you return," Voldemort suggested, shifting the topic. "For now, I'm curious. Have you read the travel book I gave you?" Blake nodded in response. "And the magic described within it? Have you attempted to learn it?" Voldemort inquired further. After a brief pause, Blake admitted, "I'm hesitant to try it, yet I can sense its power." Voldemort was pleased with Blake's admission of fear rather than a lack of understanding. It indicated that Blake had grasped the theoretical aspects of the magic, a promising sign of his innate talent. "Indeed, it's powerful," Voldemort acknowledged, demonstrating his mastery over dark arts by conjuring a ball of fire in his hand. The display of power visibly shocked Blake, confirming the magic's potency exceeded his expectations. Voldemort's demonstration was not just a show of strength, but a lesson in the potential within dark magic. He encouraged Blake to attempt casting the Fiendfire Curse, assuring him of his guidance and support. Despite Blake's hesitation, Voldemort's confidence was infectious. "Really? Can you truly assist me?" Blake asked, still uncertain. "Without a doubt, no one is more knowledgeable about the dark arts than I am." Voldemort assured him, his confidence unwavering. Encouraged, Blake prepared to cast the spell. Despite his extensive theoretical knowledge, this was his first practical attempt at using the Fiendfire Curse. His movements were tentative and unpracticed, yet accurate, a testament to his potential in dark magic. Voldemort guided him, advising a slow release of magical power. However, before he could finish his instructions, Blake's spell erupted into a massive inferno, catching Voldemort off guard. The flames, fierce and uncontrollable, bore the semblance of a menacing skull. Voldemort, taken aback by the unexpected power of the spell, realized the situation had escalated beyond a simple demonstration. This incident not only showcased Blake's raw talent, but also hinted at the untapped potential within him. Voldemort's interest in Blake deepened, recognizing in him a formidable practitioner of the dark arts, perhaps even a worthy protege. Raising his wand, Blake inadvertently summoned a massive cloud of fiendfire, causing Voldemort to glare at him with a mix of anger and shock. For a moment, fear flashed across Voldemort's face, making Blake wonder if the Dark Lord had doubted his intentions. With a flick of his sleeve, Voldemort effortlessly dissipated the fiendfire, showcasing his unparalleled mastery of the dark arts. Despite the fear evident on his face, Blake couldn't help but feel a surge of joy inside. The system had notified him that Voldemort's momentary fear had rewarded him with a golden treasure chest. Voldemort, trying to regain his composure, scolded Blake, "You almost burned me to death just now." Blake, feigning bewilderment, apologized. "Sorry, are you okay? I didn't realize it would be so intense. I thought it would only produce a small flame." Voldemort, now fully recovered, pondered the situation. Typically, an 11-year-old wizard's first attempt at casting the Fiendfire curse would result in nothing more than a weak flame if they could produce any fire at all. However, Blake had managed to conjure a blaze large enough to fill a room on his first try, indicating his magical power far surpassed that of his peers and even most adult wizards. This realization brought a smile to Voldemort's face as he recognized Blake's potential as a prodigy in dark magic, envisioning him as a valuable asset for his future endeavors. "Blake, have you felt it? The power of dark magic. You almost killed me with it. Are you really ready to abandon such power?" Voldemort inquired, seeing an opportunity to sway Blake to his side. Blake looked up, his resolve firm. "I'm not satisfied, Professor. Can you teach me more about this power?" Voldemort, amused by Blake's ambition yet feigning concern for his allegiance, asked, "Are you prepared to betray Dumbledore?" "No, I'm merely seeking power. It doesn't mean I intend to betray Dumbledore," Blake asserted confidently. Voldemort inwardly sneered, recognizing the first sign of a potential fall to the dark side, rationalizing one's curiosity as a harmless pursuit of power. Leaving the classroom later that evening, Blake reflected on the encounter with a sense of disdain. He recalled Voldemort's parting words to him, disguised as advice to keep his study of the dark arts a secret from Dumbledore, and the promise of more lessons once he mastered the spells on the parchment. Blake scoffed at the parchment's contents, merely instructions for the Cruciatus Curse, a spell he had mastered at the age of 8 without the need for a wand or incantations. His natural affinity for such magic had manifested early. He had used it to deal with a bully in the orphanage, ensuring the tormentor never troubled anyone again. As Blake crumpled the parchment and tucked it into his pocket, he couldn't help but feel that Voldemort's offer of great power was underwhelming. He had already explored the depths of such magic on his own, and the promise of learning more from Voldemort no longer seemed as enticing as it once might have. Quirrell had barely left the room when Blake made his way directly to Dumbledore's office. Xiao Bai, who had been discreetly hiding in his pocket until now, only peeked out at this moment. "Aren't you a bit too bold, heading straight to the headmaster's office? But I'll let it slide if you treat me to sweets. Professor Dumbledore's office is always stocked with them. If Blake skips class one more time, I swear I'll—" Snape's threat hung in the air, unfinished, as the door to the headmaster's office swung open. Blake stepped inside, offering Snape a cheeky smile before turning his attention to Dumbledore, who looked less than pleased. "Good evening, Professor Dumbledore," Blake greeted him warmly. Dumbledore, his expression a mix of exasperation and curiosity, asked, "How did you get in here?" Blake, undeterred by the headmaster's tone, pressed on with his request. "May I ask a favor of you?" "What is it?" Dumbledore inquired, his voice laced with a hint of resignation. "I was hoping to gain a little advantage," Blake said, choosing his words carefully, "perhaps through less conventional means." Dumbledore's face tightened, a clear sign of his growing frustration. "The next time you wish to ask for a favor, especially one that involves using my position for personal gain, could you at least attempt to be a bit more discreet about it?" Chapter 164, Snape's Ultimatum. Dumbledore sighed, his patience wearing thin. "Next time you wish to leverage your influence for personal gain, could you at least approach me discreetly?" It was unprecedented for a student to brazenly request favors in the headmaster's office, especially in the presence of other faculty members. Snape, standing to the side with his arms crossed, couldn't help but inwardly curse. The audacity of the boy was unparalleled. Yet, despite the myriad of rule violations, here he was, standing unscathed within the walls of Hogwarts. Blake, unfazed, waved his hand dismissively. "Don't worry, we're all allies here, aren't we?" Snape grimaced. "You and I are hardly allies," Blake feigned surprise. "Oh, have you rejoined the Death Eaters?" Snape's expression soured further. "Nonsense!" "Then why deny our camaraderie? I was under the impression you had betrayed us once again," Blake teased. At his wit's end, Snape reached for his euphoria potion, fearing his anger might literally be the death of him. Dumbledore interjected, attempting to clarify. "I believe what Professor Snape means is that his alliance with you is not as you perceive." Blake, puzzled, responded, "But if you're allies with him and I'm allies with you, doesn't that make us all allies? There's no need for confusion." Snape, desperately seeking solace in his potion, caught Blake's eye. Euphoria potion? Do you have more? Blake's concern shifted to Nagini, who had been unusually subdued. Perhaps a bit of euphoria could lift her spirits? Snape, in a rare moment of haste, downed the remaining potion. Given your proficiency in potions, I'm surprised you're in need. Can't you concoct your own euphoria potion? Blake retorted. Oh, I could, but I worry mine might surpass yours in quality, and we can't have that, can we? Snape, now slightly buoyed by the potion, snapped back. Your arrogance is truly boundless. Unperturbed, Blake pressed on. I'll make you an offer. A bottle of Phoenix Tears, free from any additives, in exchange for a supply of Euphoria potion. Snape recalled with horror the last time Blake had treated his injuries with Phoenix Tears mixed with chili water. The pain was indescribable, far surpassing that of the Cruciatus curse. You want Phoenix Tears again? You're insufferable, Snape muttered. Phoenix, Blake's loyal companion, hissed at Snape, clearly taking sides. Dumbledore, massaging his temples, could only lament the childish rivalry before him. Blake, what brings you here so late? I'm here to seek your approval for a new venture, Blake announced. I wish to open a convenience store on campus. Dumbledore, puzzled, inquired, and why would you want to do that? For profit, of course, but it's not just about the money. It's also to benefit my classmates, Blake explained with a gleam in his eye. Dumbledore reminded him, You already receive a generous allowance from me. Isn't that sufficient? Blake's eyes sparkled with ambition. It's enough, but when it comes to money, more is always better. Dumbledore couldn't help but marvel at Blake's entrepreneurial spirit, despite knowing the boy's allowance was already more than generous compared to his peers. If Ronald ever found out, Blake had never imagined he might envy Muggles, but opening a store at Hogwarts wasn't about the money for him. It was about collecting emotional treasures. He couldn't quite explain this to Dumbledore, so he defaulted to saying he liked money. After all, the pursuit of alchemy, which Blake was deeply involved in, was notoriously expensive. Even Nicole May, a renowned alchemist, had needed sponsors during his studies due to the high cost of materials. Dumbledore seemed to understand this financial burden, yet he doubted the profitability of a convenience store in a school where most students were not wealthy. You can't expect to become rich from this venture, Dumbledore pointed out, noting that the income from such a store would be modest at best. Surprisingly, he offered Blake an additional 200 galleons a month as an allowance, a sum that made Snape, who was listening, visibly envious, given his own salary was just over 100 galleons. No, Professor, I have enough money, Blake declined the offer. I see this as an opportunity to earn some extra pocket money and provide a valuable service to the school. A convenience store on campus would save students the hassle of traveling to Hogsmeade or ordering goods via OWL for simple needs. Dumbledore seemed skeptical until Blake presented him with a handful of alpine lollipops, candies from the Muggle world. The gesture seemed to win him over, and he approved the proposal. Snape, however, was less than pleased, accusing Dumbledore of favoritism. Blake cheekily offered Snape a discount on shampoo, a product the professor notoriously despised, leading to a humorous exchange between them. Blake's ability to irritate Snape earned him a golden treasure chest, and a reward in his quest for emotional treasures. Dumbledore suggested placing the store next to the auditorium, a location with high foot traffic and near where students ate and rested. Blake was thrilled with the idea, realizing it was the perfect spot. Dumbledore also suggested that Blake could sell the unique fruits and vegetables he grew in the greenhouse Professor Sprout had allocated to him. This idea excited Blake, as it would allow students from other houses to taste his special produce, further enriching the Hogwarts community. Indeed, if you sell it, you can also add to your collection of emotional treasures. Snape began to sneer once more. What do you think? Blake found Snape's reaction disappointing. He had been having a good conversation with Dumbledore, but Snape's skepticism was a stark contrast. Since you're planning to open a convenience store, do you intend to skip classes to manage it? Snape challenged. That's unacceptable. You must attend your classes on time, Dumbledore interjected, already considering finding a house elf to oversee the store. I won't be needed, Blake confidently stated. I have plenty of friends. Do your friends not have classes to attend? Snape retorted. Or perhaps you're relying on your foolish Niffler to mind the store? Dabao is not foolish, Blake protested, pulling Dabao from his pocket. The Niffler puffed up defiantly at Snape, then turned to Blake, seeking approval with a squeak that seemed to ask, "Boss, was that fierce enough?" Clearing his throat, Blake held Dabao up. "I believe he's up to the task." "Really? You think a Niffler is capable of running the shop?" Snape sneered, his disbelief evident. "How about we make a wager on whether Dabao can manage the store?" Blake suggested with a laugh. Snape immediately fell silent. Despite his doubts about a Niffler's ability to oversee a shop, he was hesitant to bet against Blake, knowing all too well the young wizard's cunning nature, reminiscent of Dumbledore himself. Seeing Snape's reluctance, Blake and Dumbledore proceeded to discuss the logistics. Blake decided to make Dabao the store's mascot and to assign his own house elf to assist in managing the shop. Confident in this arrangement, Blake generously offered to donate 30% of the profits to the school to support the maintenance of teaching resources, much to Dumbledore's relief. Once their discussion concluded, Snape, having waited patiently, finally said, "Are we ready to address my concerns now?" Blake, realizing there was no further benefit in engaging with Snape for the day, took out a bag of Bertie Bott's every flavor beans and began to eat, allowing Dumbledore and Snape to continue their conversation. "Ahem," Dumbledore, feeling somewhat guilty for neglecting Snape, prompted, "Please, go on. Where was I?" "Oh, right. You were mentioning Quirrell's recent behavior," Blake interjected, unable to resist. Snape shot him a glare. "Before that, I was discussing Quirrell's activities," Dumbledore recalled. "You were saying Quirrell has shown an unusual interest in the fourth floor lately?" "Not just interest. He seems less eager than before," Snape corrected. "I've been monitoring him since returning from Christmas. He used to loiter around the fourth-floor corridor every few days. But recently, he hasn't been seen near there at all. I suspect he's preoccupied with something else." Dumbledore pondered this. Could Quirrell have discovered that the Philosopher's Stone was a fake? Blake knew the real reason for Quirrell's lack of interest in the fourth-floor corridor. Quirrell had already obtained the means to bypass Fluffy from Hagrid and had mastered all the challenges on the fourth floor. Now, he was simply waiting for the right moment to act, focusing his efforts elsewhere. "Because he's focused on me," Blake revealed with a smirk. "You?" Dumbledore's expression turned grave. "He's found you?" "Yes," Blake confirmed, hinting at a deeper involvement in the unfolding events. "He came to me just now," Dumbledore announced, rising from his seat with a mix of frustration and urgency. He was visibly struggling to maintain his composure, the kind that made him want to discipline the young troublemaker before him. "Such a critical issue, and you chose to delay informing me, opting instead to discuss opening a store." Snape interjected, his tone laced with disbelief. "What did he want from you?" Blake gestured dismissively, attempting to downplay the urgency. "It's still early days, professors. He's merely begun to make his move, trying to lure me to his side. He hasn't even disclosed his full identity yet, so even with this knowledge, there's little we can do at the moment." Dumbledore, intrigued, leaned in. "What did he offer to tempt you into joining him?" "He claimed that my talents are exceptional and that being under strict control here would only serve to waste them. He's prepared to start teaching me the dark arts immediately," Blake revealed, producing a bundle of parchment from his robes. Snape, taking the parchment with a swift glance, realized the gravity of the situation. This outlines the method for casting the Cruciatus Curse. You truly have no sense of fear." Dumbledore stroked his beard thoughtfully. "So, he has regained a considerable amount of strength. Without it, he wouldn't be able to instruct anyone in the dark arts." Blake, sensing an opportunity, asked, "Then, may I learn the dark arts from him?" Dumbledore exchanged a look with Blake, a hint of resignation in his eyes. "What is inevitable will eventually come to pass. You don't need to learn from him. Professor Snape or I could teach you." A smile then broke across Dumbledore's face. "Actually, Professor Snape is the ideal candidate to teach you. Voldemort's power has significantly recovered, which suggests his legilimency abilities will soon follow. To earn his trust, he will undoubtedly test your loyalty through legilimency." The protective enchantments on your glasses may not suffice. Therefore, you must master occlumency as quickly as possible. And it just so happens. Dumbledore gestured towards Snape. Professor Snape is an expert in occlumency. Blake, frustration evident, asked through clenched teeth, "But aren't you proficient as well?" "I am, but Professor Snape has far more experience countering Voldemort's legilimency. He is, without a doubt, the best person to teach you occlumency." "I object," Snape exclaimed. "I reject," Blake echoed, their voices in rare harmony. In this moment, Snape and Blake found themselves united in their reluctance, a testament to the complex challenges they faced in preparing for the looming threat. Chapter 165, Cassandra's Objection. Cassandra exclaimed, "I object. I can learn it myself. I don't need his help." Her voice was firm, her refusal clear. "I don't think he should continue to be involved in this matter. It might be better to give him a break for a while." "I won't stop studying. Do you think I can't learn without his teaching, and that I'll be killed by that guy?" she continued, her frustration evident. "I don't care if you die or not. I'm just worried that someone will jeopardize the entire plan." Dumbledore massaged his temples, feeling the onset of a headache. He glanced at Snape, asking, "Do you intend to scare the snake only to let the tiger return?" Snape remained silent, his desire to complete his task evident in his stoic demeanor. Dumbledore then turned to Blake, his tone lightening. "Do you still wish to open a convenience store?" Blake chose not to respond, realizing that arguing with Snape any further might cost him dearly, both emotionally and materially. "Then it's settled," Dumbledore declared with authority, putting an end to the discussion. Blake sighed, resigned. Despite his objections, he had already mastered occlumency on his own. He thought, why not just walk with Snape and claim he had learned it? That should suffice, right? He couldn't fathom Dumbledore's reasoning for insisting he learn occlumency from Snape. Even if the intention was to mend their strained relationship, it seemed an unreasonable approach. As for learning dark magic from Snape, Blake scoffed at the idea. He doubted Snape's expertise in dark magic could match his own, especially after devouring all the books sent by Grindelwald. It seemed Snape shared his skepticism, though he was loath to admit it. Despite his disdain for Blake, Snape couldn't deny the boy's talent. He begrudgingly acknowledged that teaching Blake magic would likely be a swift process. "Once you learn it, get out of here. Save me from the eyesore," Snape thought. Their mutual disdain was palpable as they exchanged cold glances and turned away from each other. On Saturday morning, Cassandra entered the auditorium to find an unexpected sight. A crowd had gathered around the Hufflepuff table, where a small room, long locked, now stood open. The walls had been replaced with transparent glass, enlarging the space and transforming it into a convenience store. The shelves were stocked with an array of products, including the famous Potter brand shampoo, offered at a discount to professors. Snacks, soft drinks, and enormous fruits, unmistakably produced by Blake, filled the shelves. Cassandra knew immediately who was behind this venture. The store was bustling with young wizards, their excitement palpable as they explored the novel offerings. Blake was nowhere to be seen, but a house elf diligently attended to the customers, introducing them to various snacks. A niffler lounged on a miniature armchair at the counter, a magic mirror perched on its eyes, lazily collecting money from the shoppers. Cho Chang, holding a lollipop, approached the counter where the niffler, named Debow, indicated the price with a small sign. Malfoy swaggered over, tossing a galleon onto the counter with a haughty demand for all the spicy strips. Debow adjusted his magic mirror, a gesture that underscored the unique charm of Blake's convenience store. Debow confidently retrieved a shiny silver magic wand from his pocket and placed it on the counter, causing Malfoy to stare at the familiar object in terror. The mere mention of Blake was enough to send shivers down his spine, as Blake had been a daunting figure from his childhood. It was then that Malfoy remembered Blake's notorious reputation at Hogwarts, including the rumor about him owning a formidable creature. Reluctantly, Malfoy decided to purchase 2 packs of whatever Debow was selling, only to be met with another sign that read, "No change given." This left Malfoy feeling utterly defeated, as if he had swallowed a fly. He dared not provoke Blake or his pet any further, so he accepted the loss and left without his change. Dabao, amused by the encounter, gleefully pocketed the money. Cassandra, who had been watching the entire exchange, couldn't help but laugh. She remarked on how Dabao's cunning mirrored that of his owner, Blake, highlighting the adage that pets often resemble their owners. Just then, Blake approached, offering Cassandra a drink of milk tea and suggesting she try it with full sugar. Cassandra was surprised to see Blake without his white cat, Xiaobai, which was a rare occurrence. She inquired about Blake's decision to open a shop within Hogwarts, a feat unheard of and likely to spark envy among the shopkeepers of Hogsmeade. Blake explained that he needed to earn some extra money due to recent expenses. Cassandra was astounded by Blake's audacity to set up shop in Hogwarts, something not even the entrepreneurial Weasley twins had managed to do. When asked about Xiaobai, Blake casually mentioned that he had entrusted the cat to Mr. Scamander for the time being. Unbeknownst to Cassandra, Blake had been busy preparing for an event involving magical creatures and had managed to encapsulate several powerful beings into elf balls, including Xiaobai. Their conversation was interrupted by Snape's unmistakable voice, chiding Blake for forgetting a promise made to Dumbledore. Snape's irritation was palpable, especially upon noticing the Potter-branded shampoos displayed in Blake's shop. Despite Snape's annoyance, Blake remained unfazed, understanding that Snape's timing was deliberate and aimed at thwarting his plans. Resigned to his fate, Blake followed Snape, but not before instructing Baker to serve Cassandra a cup of milk tea with half sugar, showing his considerate side even in the face of adversity. Cassandra watched Snape's retreating back with pursed lips. She had known before anyone else that Xiaobai wouldn't be present today, presenting her with a perfect opportunity. But now, Snape was complicating matters. "Miss Wally, this is the milk tea my master instructed me to deliver to you. It's half sugar, as the master mentioned you prefer it less sweet, and half sugar should be just right," the house elf Baker said, offering her a cup of milk tea. Cassandra accepted the milk tea with a sigh, taking a sip. The taste brightened her mood instantly. The sweetness was indeed just right. Delicious. "My little master remembers your preferences quite well," Baker remarked. A shy smile crept onto Cassandra's face. Does he really know my tastes so well?" "I knew it. I knew he was." Her thoughts were interrupted as she watched Baker pull out a notebook and start flipping through it. "My little master's orders, I've written them all down. Let's see. Miss Wally dislikes overly sweet things but enjoys coffee. Miss Granger prefers strawberries. Miss Zhang is fond of spicy food. And Miss Eyebrow and Miss Tonks, well, they like everything they eat," Professor babbling. Cassandra's face fell as she eyed the thick notebook in Baker's hand. "Bastard! Scumbag!" she muttered under her breath. In the underground classroom, Blake sat awkwardly on a black sofa, facing Snape who stood before him, wand raised. "Next, I will attempt to penetrate your mind using legilimency," Snape announced. "And all you need to do is one thing. Don't think about anything. Do you understand?" Blake feigned ignorance about occlumency, asking, "Is that all? No spells or precautions?" Snape replied coldly, "No spells, and as for precautions, if you had paid attention, you wouldn't need to ask such a foolish question. Listen, I'll say it again. Keep your mind blank. Don't think about anything. Only through intense legilimency can your mind develop a natural defense. Remember, I'm trying to help you make protecting your mind a habit. This is the fastest way to master occlumency. You don't have much time left, and I want you to take this seriously. The Dark Lord won't give you any reminders when he probes your mind. So are you ready?" Blake nodded. "Let's do this." "Okay, take off your glasses." Blake complied, removing the alchemy glasses he had been wearing for some time, and looked directly into Snape's eyes. "Legilimens," Snape commanded, his spell forcefully invading Blake's mind. He immediately encountered the memory of Blake's recent conversation with Cassandra. "Focus. Don't think about it," Snape instructed coldly. Blake's lips curled slightly. He had played his part. Now it was time to end this charade. His mind suddenly became as still as stagnant water, leaving Snape astonished to find absolutely nothing. This was the first and most challenging step in learning occlumency, emptying the mind completely. Only then could one move to the second step, fabricating memories. A wizard's ability to create false memories marked the initial mastery of occlumency. Snape had recognized Blake's potential, but he hadn't anticipated such rapid progress. Just as Snape was reeling from the shock, his consciousness was abruptly pulled away. When he regained his senses, he found himself in a strange space, with a crack in one corner. As he moved his consciousness towards the crack, a sudden whoosh enveloped him. Consciousness was forcefully expelled by the peculiar energy emanating from the crack. However, the ordeal was far from over. When Snape's consciousness finally returned to his body, he was met with an astonishing revelation. His memories began to surface automatically, unfolding scene by scene within his mind. There was the little girl with green eyes. And then there was Snape, a teenager, hanging upside down, his anger boiling over as he spat out the word, mudblood. His voice was filled with contempt, yet beneath it lay a complexity of emotions not immediately apparent. The memories continued to cascade, each one vivid and intense, as if he were reliving them in the moment. Snape found himself caught in a whirlwind of past experiences, each memory bringing with it a flood of emotions. It was as though his life was flashing before his eyes, offering him a chance to re-examine the choices he had made and the paths he had taken. As he navigated through the labyrinth of his memories, Snape began to see them in a new light. The anger and bitterness that had once clouded his judgment started to dissipate, giving way to a deeper understanding of his own actions and their consequences. It was a moment of profound introspection, one that would inevitably lead him to confront the truths he had long sought to avoid. In this unexpected journey through his past, Snape was forced to face the reality of his choices and the impact they had not only on his own life, but on those around him as well. It was a painful, yet necessary process of self-discovery, one that would ultimately shape the course of his future. Chapter 166. Do you know what love is? Snape felt himself falling backward onto the ground, his limbs weak and his mind buzzing as if he had been punched in the head. He saw Blake stand up and walk over to him, then pour something into his mouth. Startled, Snape tried to struggle, but he was too weak to resist. Just when he thought he might be facing his end, he suddenly felt his strength returning and his vision clearing. Looking up, Snape saw Blake standing in front of him. "Sorry, Professor Snape, I did it on purpose," Blake said. "You've encountered a part of my special powers." Struggling to his feet, Snape tasted the bitterness in his mouth, realizing that what Blake had administered was merely an ordinary mind-boosting potion designed to revive someone from a comatose state, not the harmful potion he had feared. However, at that moment, Snape had no interest in understanding these powers. "What did you see?" Snape asked coldly. "Sorry, although it wasn't my intention, I saw everything," Blake admitted. Snape's face turned pale instantly. "Get out," he yelled, pointing at the door. As Blake left Snape's office without a word, a system notification sounded in his head, acknowledging his extreme anger and rewarding him with a diamond treasure chest. Although it had been an accident, Blake knew that staying would only provoke Snape further, given the invasion of his privacy. Once alone, Snape felt as if his heart was bleeding. The encounter with Blake's power had unearthed memories he had either deliberately forgotten or dared not recall, reopening wounds that had barely healed. Blake, walking out of the dungeon, reflected on Snape's situation. What a poor fellow. He still believes Lily left him because of that mudblood comment, not realizing it was merely the final straw. Their values were too different. Their paths would have diverged eventually. Meanwhile, Blake saw Dumbledore at the entrance of the canteen, buying a small bow and a cup of full sugar milk tea. "Heard from Severus, you were supposed to start your lessons today. Back so soon?" Dumbledore asked, then requested extra pearls for his drink, delighting the server. Dumbledore, with a satisfied smile, placed the bow on his white beard, which automatically tied itself. Blake, scratching his head, admitted, "Well, Professor, I seem to have screwed up again." Surprised, Dumbledore asked, "What did you do to Severus?" "It's nothing, just that, when he was training me in legilimency, his conscience accidentally got sucked into a crack near the source of my magic. It was ejected, and the legilimency backfired. I saw all those memories. I swear I didn't mean to." Dumbledore sighed. "It's not your fault. That's a hurdle he can't overcome. Forget it. I'll teach you." Realizing Snape was not in a state to teach, Dumbledore decided to change the location for their lessons to avoid suspicion from others. especially since visiting the headmaster's office too frequently might raise eyebrows. Actually, I've learned occlumency, Blake revealed. Dumbledore, turning around in surprise, asked, "Not from Severus?" "Yes, it was after that magical incident," Blake explained, hinting at the complex journey of learning and understanding that lay ahead. Blake's consciousness was momentarily overwhelmed by a surge of power, and then, quite unexpectedly, he found himself mastering it. Dumbledore locked eyes with Blake, searching for a hint of deceit or emotion. After a moment, a look of surprise crossed his face. Unlike with others, where a mere glance sufficed to gauge their truthfulness without resorting to legitimacy, Dumbledore found Blake's gaze impenetrable. It was as if Blake had erected an impenetrable barrier around his mind, a clear sign of proficient occlumency. Dumbledore exhaled a sigh of relief. "It seems you have indeed mastered it," he acknowledged. "With the most challenging part behind us, the rest of your training should be considerably easier. Now, let's proceed to the next stage." Blake, slightly puzzled, inquired, "And what would that be?" Dumbledore's insistence on moving forward suggested that despite the self-reliant nature of occlumency practice, there was still something he deemed necessary for Blake to learn or experience firsthand. Without further explanation, Dumbledore led Blake out of the Great Hall and beyond the castle walls. It was a weekend, and most of the senior students had taken the opportunity to visit Hogsmeade, leaving only a few scattered individuals by the Black Lake. The allure of the village's unique offerings and the chance to escape the confines of the school grounds made it a popular destination. Their destination was the Homping Willow, a choice that immediately made sense to Blake. The tree concealed the entrance to a secret passage leading to the Shrieking Shack, a place Dumbledore had used to safeguard Remus Lupin's secret as a werewolf. The shack served as Lupin's refuge during his transformations, hidden from the prying eyes of the wizarding world. With a flick of his wand, Dumbledore momentarily stilled the Humping Willow's thrashing branches, revealing the entrance to the secret passage. Blake hesitated, concerned about being seen in broad daylight. "It's okay, Blake. A distraction spell surrounds the Homping Willow," Dumbledore reassured him. "Unless someone is directly following us, they'll overlook our presence here." Relieved, Blake followed Dumbledore into the secret passage, marveling at the precautions taken to ensure their privacy. The passage itself was spacious and well-maintained, a stark contrast to the decaying wooden door that marked its end. Dumbledore restored the door to its former state with a simple spell, revealing the interior of the Shrieking Shack. "Wait here for a moment. I'll prepare the space," Dumbledore said, stepping inside. Blake waited at the threshold, peering into the room beyond. The shack, once a place of pain and solitude for Lupin, now stood as a testament to the lengths Dumbledore would go to protect his students. It was a reminder of the complex web of secrets and sacrifices that underpin their world. As Dumbledore busied himself inside, Blake couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. Whatever Dumbledore had planned, it was clear that this next phase of his training was about to challenge him in ways he hadn't anticipated. In a modestly sized room, the furnishings were comprehensive, including a bed nestled against the wall. However, the touch of time had left its mark on everything within. The wooden floors were uneven, showing signs of wear and tear. As Dumbledore entered, the sound of wood creaking underfoot could be heard. With a graceful wave of the Elder Wand, reminiscent of a conductor leading an orchestra, he initiated a transformation. In moments, the room began to reverse in age. Furniture and floors were restored to their prime, and the thick layers of dust vanished, leaving the space immaculate. Approximately 5 minutes later, Dumbledore gestured for Blake to enter. The Screaming Shack had undergone a complete metamorphosis, looking as though it had just been refurbished. The sight left Blake in awe of Dumbledore's prowess, not just in magic, but seemingly in housekeeping as well. The room had been altered, notably with an expansion of space opposite the bed. A simple, undetectable extension charm, Dumbledore explained, suggesting the need for more room for spell training. Blake, piecing together Dumbledore's intentions, realized that the lessons would extend beyond occlumency. Dumbledore confirmed this, emphasizing the importance of mastering occlumency to enhance overall magical ability, but also revealing plans to teach other forms of magic. Blake was taken aback. The notion of Dumbledore, a paragon of white magic, teaching him dark arts seemed incongruous. Surely, Dumbledore would be opposed to any engagement with such dangerous magic. Yet, as Dumbledore settled into an armchair and beckoned Blake to sit, he addressed the elephant in the room. He expressed a preference for Blake to learn about dark magic under his guidance, rather than from others who might impart harmful ideologies. Dumbledore's approach to teaching dark magic was not about wielding it, but understanding it for prevention. He likened dark magic to a double-edged sword, capable of harming the user as much as the target. He cited the Cruciatus Curse and the Killing Curse as examples, spells fueled by malevolence and sadism, warning of the psychological toll they could exact on the caster. Blake, puzzled, questioned how one could possibly avoid the inherent risks of dark magic. Dumbledore assured him that it was possible to mitigate these emotional side effects without diminishing the spell's potency. However, he cautioned Blake about the gravity of using dark magic, emphasizing the irreversible harm it could inflict on others. Dumbledore's lesson was clear. While understanding dark magic was necessary, its use required the utmost caution and moral consideration. As Blake read Dumbledore's final words, a fleeting expression of anguish crossed his face. He surmised that Dumbledore, in those moments, might have been reminiscing about Ariana. So, in teaching you about dark magic, I will concentrate on two key aspects, Dumbledore began. Firstly, how to shield yourself from the dark forces that seek to harm you. Secondly, discerning the appropriate moments to wield this magic. Blake nodded in understanding, signaling his grasp of the concepts. Dumbledore paused to take a sip of his juice before continuing. Magic, whether it's dark arts or conventional spells, often hinges on one critical element that influences its efficacy. Can you guess what that is? After pondering for a moment, Blake ventured. Emotion? A look of approval appeared on Dumbledore's face. Precisely, Blake. I half expected you to mention incantations or wand movements. Yet, for a wizard adept in casting spells without a wand or uttering a word, those aspects are secondary. Emotions are the true catalysts. He leaned forward, his eyes reflecting a depth of wisdom. As I mentioned earlier, dark magic draws its formidable power from intense emotions, with hatred being the most prevalent. This kind of magic thrives on the desire to see others suffer or perish. However, it's crucial to remember that hatred isn't the sole emotion that defines our existence, Dumbledore added, his tone softening. Blake nodded, absorbing the lesson. So, you're suggesting we can channel different emotions in place of hatred? Dumbledore smiled, a twinkle in his eye. In a manner of speaking, yes and no. Let me ask you, do you understand what love is? This question, simple yet profound, hinted at the underlying complexity of magic and human emotion. Dumbledore was not merely teaching Blake about the mechanics of dark magic, but was guiding him towards a deeper understanding of how emotions could shape one's magical abilities and, by extension, their impact on the world. Chapter 167, The Power of Love and the Invitation to the Dark Arts. Blake regarded Dumbledore with a hint of suspicion. Love? He inquired. Professor, are you referring to love? Indeed, Blake, Dumbledore affirmed. Love manifests in various forms. The care Lady Marianne showed you in the orphanage was an expression of love. Sharing joy with those you hold dear is another form of love. Choosing to make sacrifices for something or someone also stems from love. Love is an intense, positive emotional state, the most sincere and profound human emotion. It harbors tremendous power. Blake was somewhat familiar with Dumbledore's assertions. The mysterious and potent nature of love had been demonstrated when Voldemort was vanquished by its magic. Lily Potter's love for Harry had inadvertently cast a protective ancient magic over him, causing Voldemort's killing curse to rebound. Moreover, the Department of Mysteries within the Ministry of Magic had always been dedicated to studying this power. Indeed, love was considered the most challenging yet powerful force, which contributed to Dumbledore's formidable strength. So, you're suggesting we replace hatred with love? Blake asked, seeking clarification. Not exactly, Dumbledore explained. We need to embrace the power of love as our foundation, our source of strength. Noticing Blake's puzzled expression, he elaborated, consider why you might attack someone. Is it a mere desire to kill, or is it to protect something dear to you? Protect? Blake echoed. Yes, protection. The intense desire to safeguard something out of love, Dumbledore continued. In such cases, the power of protection is derived from love. Blake began to grasp the concept. The motivation behind actions, even those as extreme as murder, mattered. It was a question of whether the act was driven by selfish desires or a nobler cause. Although it might seem hypocritical, the distinction was crucial. Dumbledore further illustrated his point by comparing the intensity of emotions in different scenarios, such as arguments or spellcasting. Strong, determined emotions could amplify the power of magic, surpassing even that of dark arts. As Blake pondered these insights, Dumbledore patiently waited, sipping his juice. He hoped Blake would understand the significance of harnessing love as a source of strength. If so, Dumbledore would have no reservations about teaching him all he knew of the dark arts. Voldemort and his Death Eaters, who failed to comprehend the magic of love, would never grasp its impact. After a moment of reflection, Blake looked up. Dumbledore, with a gentle laugh, asked, "Do you understand?" "I'm beginning to," Blake admitted. "That's already quite an achievement. I've spent most of my life studying this power and have only grasped a fraction," Dumbledore said, visibly relieved. He then presented an old notebook to Blake. "This contains my research on dark magic, conducted alongside Grindelwald. I entrust it to you, hoping you'll grasp the essence of our discussion. Approach this power with caution." Holding the notebook, Blake felt a surge of disbelief. He had anticipated learning the dark arts from Voldemort or Grindelwald, but never from Dumbledore himself. Blake harbored little interest in the dark arts, for he now wielded a power far surpassing the so-called black magic. "Perhaps it's best I don't learn it," Blake mused aloud. "Learn, Blake. You might think you can live without a sword, but you cannot afford to be unarmed," Dumbledore countered gently, pushing a book into Blake's hands. "I've always known you to be a good person. Even if I refrain from teaching you, Grindelwald will surely find a way to do so. Moreover, if you don't learn, you'll find Tom's challenges insurmountable, unless, of course, you're considering withdrawal from this endeavor." Blake shook his head decisively. "I'm not backing down. The treasures within Tom's vault, especially as Voldemort's primary Horcrux, are too valuable. The drop rate for treasure chests is exceptionally high, and facing Voldemort directly often yields double rewards, given Quirrell's current possession. Since you're determined, let's begin. Tom wanted you to learn the Cruciatus Curse, didn't he?" Dumbledore's voice was firm yet encouraging. Returning to his dormitory, Blake felt as if he were in a dream. He had spent the morning discussing the Cruciatus and Imperius curses with Dumbledore. Reflecting on Voldemort's words, Blake realized Dumbledore's intentions. Although he found Dumbledore's educational methods questionable, they were effective. Had Blake been the naive boy Voldemort expected, seeking to learn dark magic for power, he might have fallen into the trap again. But Dumbledore's openness about learning dark arts, without the need for betrayal, shifted Blake's perspective entirely. It seemed Dumbledore had finally embraced the notion that prohibition often leads to greater curiosity, especially with Grindelwald's looming threat. Blake stored his notebook and surveyed the empty dormitory. With his roommates absent, he raised his hand, and with a light tap, the air cracked like a shattered mirror. Stepping into the mirror space, a realm of supreme magic he seldom used, Blake appreciated its advantages over the invisibility cloak. This alternate dimension allowed him to observe without detection and manipulate objects without real-world consequences. Considering Nagini's location in the Room of Requirement, Blake decided the mirror space was the safest place for opening treasure chests. System: I wish to open the treasure chest. Let's start with the gold one. Ding! The golden treasure chest is being opened for the host. Ding! Congratulations to the host for gaining mastery in potions. Ding! The bronze treasure chest is being opened for the host. Ding! Congratulations to the host for acquiring 500 rounds of 44 Magnum ammunition. Bullets? Excellent. No need to manufacture them myself. Just a few modifications. Blake mused, opting not to craft but to open all the treasure chests directly. Discovering the revolver in a bronze chest had shown him that even early-stage rewards could be valuable, not just alchemy materials or low-quality equipment. With the dismantling system, he could transform these lesser rewards into something more. Blake had amassed a significant collection of alchemy and potion materials. Given the rate at which he was conducting his alchemy experiments, the monthly allowance of 100 gold galleons that Dumbledore provided was barely sufficient to cover his expenses. Upon reviewing his recent acquisitions, Blake found the most valuable item to be a golden treasure chest, a gift from a disheartened Snape. This chest had elevated Blake's potion mastery to its peak. The other chests he opened also contained valuable items, including 500 grams of unicorn horn fragments. Turning his attention to the diamond treasure chest in his system space, which he received after repelling Snape's attempt at legilimency, Blake opened it without a second thought. His lucky potion had been depleted during his last study of Nagini's soul, leaving him no choice. As the system announced the opening of the chest and the rewards, Blake eagerly awaited. "Congratulations to the host for obtaining a collection of basic alchemy formulas from another world," the system chimed. However, it quickly noted the discrepancy between these rewards and Blake's world, prompting an urgent assimilation of the formulas to fit his current reality. The result was a collection of special potion formulas. Blake's eyes widened in amazement as he held the thick, manuscript-like book that appeared in his hands. The cover was blank, giving it the appearance of a personal notebook. As he flipped through the pages, he discovered formulas for potions with incredible effects. The Rejuvenation Potion, which could make a user physically 10 years younger, with a recommendation to take it around the age of 30 for optimal results. The Ding Yan Potion, which preserved the user's appearance at the age of consumption. The Shaping Potion, capable of transforming magical animals. The Magic Replenishing Potion, for quick restoration of stamina and magical power. The Zuisheng Mengde Potion, which allowed people to dream of their deepest desires. Blake realized these formulas likely originated from a world of immortals, yet they were basic recipes in that context. In his world, however, they were extraordinary. With his potion proficiency at its maximum, Blake was eager to start brewing. He envisioned the wealth and emotional rewards these potions could bring, especially from women in both the Muggle and Wizarding worlds. The Rejuvenation and Ding Yan potions, in particular, promised to be highly sought after for their age-reversing and appearance-preserving effects. As Blake contemplated the potential fame and fortune these potions could bring, his thoughts were interrupted by Snape's cold inquiry. "What are you doing here again?" Blake, caught in his plans for showcasing his potion-making skills, had not noticed Snape's approach. His mind raced with ideas, especially about the shape-changing potion, though he worried about having sufficient materials. Yet, confident in his abilities and resources, Blake was ready to take on the challenge, aware that the success of his potions depended on public recognition of his craftsmanship. "I don't want to see you right now," Blake stated firmly, leaving no room for argument. "Professor Snape, I've come to propose a deal." "I have no interest in making deals with you," Snape retorted sharply. "I'm sorry, but I've glimpsed into your heart," Blake continued, undeterred by Snape's cold demeanor. Snape's gaze turned icy, his expression one that threatened immediate retribution. "You should realize that I understand the pain you're enduring, and as it happens, I've found a way to help you." "What could you possibly offer me?" Snape asked, his voice laced with skepticism and barely concealed anger. Had it been any other student, Snape would have expelled them from his office without a second thought. His patience for such intrusions was thin. "I have a potion," Blake said, ignoring Snape's hostility. "After you drink it, you will see what you most desire." Snape scoffed at the notion. "And why, pray tell, would I consume anything you provide?" Without a word, Blake produced a glass bottle. Inside, a dark blue potion shimmered like a precious gem. Despite his deep-seated bias against Blake, Snape found his gaze irresistibly drawn to the bottle. A peculiar sensation began to stir within him, a compelling attraction to the potion. The more he looked at it, the more he yearned to drink it. "This potion is named Drunken Dreams. As the name implies, it grants the drinker a most pleasant dream," Blake explained. Snape eyed the potion warily. His distrust of Blake was profound, yet the allure of the potion was undeniable. He wanted to reject it outright, but found himself inexplicably unable to do so. Blake watched Snape's internal struggle with a mix of empathy and satisfaction. The Drunken Dreams potion had a unique property. The greater a person's longing for something, the more irresistible the potion became to them. For Snape, the potion didn't just represent a dream, it symbolized the presence of his deepest desire, Lily. How could he possibly resist? With a sudden movement, Snape snatched the bottle from Blake, uncapped it, and drank the potion in one swift gulp. Chapter 168. Snape, do you really love Lily? Bright sunlight streamed through the window, its intensity making Snape squint. He couldn't recall the last time he had seen the sun. For so long, he had considered his dark, damp basement office his sanctuary, where only the flickering flames of a crucible offered any semblance of warmth. As Snape regained his senses, he began to survey his surroundings, only to be met with surprise. He found himself in his home at Spinner's End, yet it was unlike he remembered. It was familiar, yet unfamiliar. The general layout remained the same, but the details had undergone many changes. The most striking difference was the cleanliness. It was spotless. Seated at the dining table, Snape noticed an ordinary plate of fried eggs and bacon in front of him. Across from him sat an empty chair, a sight that puzzled him given his years of solitude. The sound of footsteps approached, and someone entered the dining room from the kitchen, causing Snape's heart to skip a beat. "Severus, don't wait for me. Go ahead and eat. Don't you have something to do later?" The voice, one that had haunted his dreams, left Snape speechless. "You," Snape began, his voice trailing off. "Severus, I think we need to talk. Can you stop associating with those people? We could start a potions workshop together," the person continued, her voice gentle yet firm. Tears welled up in Snape's eyes as he looked at her. "Lily, I've missed you so much. Really, I have." "Severus, what's wrong with you?" Lily asked, concern evident in her voice as she placed the plate she was holding on the table and moved closer to him. Snape was momentarily frozen, overwhelmed by the familiar scent of lilies that he had dreamt of countless times. "Okay, maybe this isn't the right time. We can talk about it later," Lily said softly, a hint of disappointment in her voice. Snape remained silent, unable to process the reality before him. The person he had longed for, whom he believed was lost forever, was standing right in front of him, rendering him incapable of coherent thought. "If it's not convenient for you to talk now, I'll leave," Lily said, her tone tinged with frustration. "Really, I visit you every week, and each time I find you in this state. If I hadn't come, would you ever bother to clean this place?" After placing the breakfast she had prepared in front of Snape, she added, "You should eat this too. You've always had a hearty appetite." With that, Lily grabbed her coat and headed for the door. "Lily, Snape started, rising quickly from his seat. "Severus, what's wrong with you? You seem off today," Lily remarked, a weary look crossing her face. "No, Snape stammered, struggling to find the words. "Look, just take care of yourself," Lily said before she apparated away, leaving Snape alone with his thoughts. "What on earth is happening?" Snape murmured, staring at the empty street, filled with confusion and a sense of dread. She couldn't have." A sharp pain suddenly pierced his head, bringing with it a flood of memories, both familiar and unfamiliar. Didn't I call her a mudblood?" he remembered with a pang of guilt. "And she wasn't with Potter, was she?" As these memories settled, Snape felt an odd sense of relief, despite the confusion. It was as if a weight had been lifted, knowing that Lily had rejected Potter's advances. Returning to his bedroom, Snape caught sight of his reflection in the mirror. To his astonishment, he looked young again, as if no time had passed since his youth. Sitting back down, he began to sort through these newly surfaced memories, but the smile that had begun to form on his face soon faded. Both he and Lily had just graduated, and Voldemort was at the height of his power. Although Lily hadn't broken. Severus Snape, caught in a whirlwind of regret and confusion, found himself staring at the hideous black dark mark etched into his skin. A mark he had secretly accepted, unbeknownst to Lily, the one person he cared for most. Panic urged through him at the thought of her discovering his dark allegiance. "If only I had arrived sooner," he lamented, vowing never to have joined the Death Eaters had he been given a second chance. Amidst his turmoil, a sharp pain seared through his arm, a summoning from the Dark Lord himself. With a sense of dread, Snape apparated to the designated meeting point, where he found himself among familiar faces, Bellatrix, Lucius Malfoy, Avery, all gathered around Voldemort, who greeted them with a twisted smile. Voldemort's voice cut through the air, mocking Dumbledore's efforts to form a resistance against them. Laughter echoed among the Death Eaters, bolstered by their blind faith in their invincible leader. The Dark Lord's plan was clear: to demonstrate their power against Dumbledore's fledgling force, rumored to consist of inexperienced graduates and worn-out aurors. Reluctantly, Snape donned his hood and mask, preparing for the raid on what was rumored to be a stronghold of Dumbledore's new alliance, the Order of the Phoenix. A sinking feeling gripped him as he realized Lily might be among those they were about to attack. The operation quickly turned chaotic. An explosion marked the beginning of a fierce battle, revealing the ambush that awaited them. Amidst the chaos, Snape spotted a younger Dumbledore engaged in a fierce duel with Voldemort. Then, a familiar voice reached his ears: James Potter. Fueled by a deep-seated hatred, Snape launched a vicious attack on James, who was clearly outmatched. As Snape prepared to deliver the final blow, a green light shot from his wand towards James. But in a heart-stopping moment, a slender figure with long red hair and the scent of lilies intervened. Lily. The realization that his curse had struck Lily instead of James froze Snape in horror. Her green eyes dimmed as she collapsed between them. In a frenzy of despair, Snape removed his mask and hood, rushing to her side. "It was you, Snape, you monster! You killed Lily!" James's accusation pierced the air, but Snape was lost in a vortex of grief and disbelief, staring at Lily's fading life, the gravity of his actions crashing down upon him. Struck by lightning, Snape felt a sharp pain in his chest before everything turned black. Time seemed to stand still until he finally opened his eyes again, greeted by the familiar bright sunshine. Confused and alarmed, he looked around. "Severus, don't wait for me. Go ahead and eat. Don't you have something to do later?" The familiar voice, the familiar words, and the sight of Lily emerging from the kitchen with a dinner plate made his heart skip a beat. Has time reversed? He wondered aloud, only to find himself opening his eyes once more. This time, however, he was not met with sunshine but the darkness of his basement office. Am I back?" Snape whispered to himself, a wave of bitter sadness washing over him. Why am I back here?" he cried out in despair. I still have a way to change things." "You've tried many times, yet you still fail, don't you?" came Blake's voice, slow and deliberate, from the side. Snape turned sharply, just in time to see Blake sitting on a chair, holding the glass bottle that once contained the strange potion. "Was it that potion you gave me?" Snape demanded. "What in the world happened?" Blake set the bottle down. "The potion of drunkenness, dreams, and death has only one effect. Those who drink it will dream of their deepest desires coming true." Reflecting on his experience, Snape realized that his deepest wishes had indeed seemed to materialize, a version of Lily who wasn't alienated by his cruel words. "Your last regret was using that insulting word towards Lily Evans, wasn't it?" Blake observed. Snape's face paled, his lips tightening. "So, what you desired most was for none of that to have happened, for you not to have said that word, and for Lily not to have left you. That's what you dreamed about, wasn't it?" Snape glared at Blake, incredulous. "How do you know?" "It's not my fault, Professor Snape. A small dose of this potion could have sufficed, but you consumed an entire bottle. Thus I had to examine your mind, and unfortunately, I saw all of your dreams." Snape's anger was palpable, but his current weakness prevented him from retaliating. He silently vowed to exact revenge on Blake if he could. Unperturbed by Snape's murderous gaze, Blake continued. "Normally, dying in the dream should have awakened you, but the excessive dose caused the dream to reset, trapping you in a cycle of reincarnation. You hoped to change the outcome of Lily's death, but things didn't turn out as you expected, did they? No matter how many times you tried, no matter what changes you made, she died in front of you every time, didn't she?" Snape, frustrated and angry, insisted, "I still have a way to change it. I still have a way." Blake, with a hint of sympathy, replied, "Though it wasn't my intention, I now know everything about you. So why not let me offer you some advice from the sidelines?" Snape, skeptical yet curious, asked, "What do you know?" Given my wide circle of friends, I believe I might understand a bit more than you do, Blake said, hinting at the genuine connections he had, which were starkly different from the ones Snape had in Slytherin. Considering your history with relationships, I have just one question for you. What do you want to ask? Snape inquired, his interest piqued. Blake stood up slowly, his voice soft yet piercing as he asked, Do you truly love Lily? Chapter 169, Nagini, I have a bold idea. A tumultuous sense of absurdity surged within Snape's heart. It was madness, he thought, to actually consider listening to what Blake had to say. The audacity of the question, whether he loved Lily, was almost too much to bear. You can't even begin to comprehend the depth of my love for her, Snape declared with unwavering conviction. Blake's response was a chuckle, a sound that to Snape was drenched in irony. It felt as though his own wounds were being mocked. What's so funny? Snape demanded, his voice laced with anger. No offense, Professor Snape, but is that what you call love? Blake posed the question gently, yet it cut deep. Let me ask you another question. Do you truly understand what love is? Snape's mouth twitched slightly. Of course he knew what love was. How could he not, after all these years dedicated to a single person? If you believe you love Lily, then surely you must know her well, Blake continued, pressing on. You claim to know everything about her, so you must be aware of her likes and dislikes, right? The color drained from Snape's face as he began to grasp where Blake was leading. If you're truly familiar with her dislikes, Blake went on, then why choose to live in a manner she despises the most? Love is about mutual respect, Professor. How can you expect her to accept you when you embody what she detests? Snape's lips trembled, words failing him. Blake's voice was relentless. You say you know Lily? No, you don't. You claim to love her, yet your actions, driven by selfishness, completely disregard her feelings. You immerse yourself in the dark arts she abhors and associate with people she despises. You've neglected her feelings for her friends. Everything you do only serves to push her further away. Awaken, Professor. Do you honestly believe that your relationship with Lily ended solely because of that mudblood incident? That was merely the final straw. She gave you opportunities, but you squandered them. Snape's voice was barely a whisper. Enough, please, no more. Blake continued, undeterred. Your conversation with Professor Dumbledore revealed the true reason you disclosed that fateful prophecy to Voldemort. It was because the prophecy didn't mention women, leading you to believe that, should Voldemort kill Harry and his father, it wouldn't matter. Once again, you overlooked Lily's feelings, failing to realize that her family meant everything to her. If you had truly understood Lily's needs, if you had recognized the importance of family to her, you would never have shared that prophecy with Voldemort. Lily might still be alive. Blake's words struck Snape like a bolt of lightning. His greatest regret had always been that fateful insult, not his failure to protect Lily from Voldemort. Indeed, he had never lamented telling Voldemort the prophecy. He had wished for James and his son's demise, hoping to have Lily to himself. You must wonder, Professor Snape, why Voldemort killed Lily despite promising to spare her, Blake said, stepping closer. It's because you never truly understood Lily or what family meant to her. You couldn't foresee that she would sacrifice her life for her child, refusing to stand aside. Thus Voldemort, compelled to kill the boy from the prophecy, had no choice but to eliminate Lily, who stood in his way. With a soft thud, Snape collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed by despair and unable to rise. Blake's final words were a devastating blow. Snape knew Blake was right, as harsh as the truth was. He finally recognized that his selfish, obstinate love had been the catalyst for all the ensuing tragedies. Ding! Distraught emotions detected, a system prompt announced. Ding! Congratulations to the host for acquiring a diamond treasure chest. This reminder of his original purpose for confronting Snape brought a momentary distraction to Blake. Despite the satisfaction of obtaining another diamond chest, the intensity of the moment and his anger at Snape's memories had momentarily overwhelmed him. After inflicting a metaphorical wound on Professor Snape's heart, Blake found himself in a situation he hadn't anticipated. Professor Snape, usually stoic and unapproachable, was now visibly distressed, to the point where he seemed to have lost all will to communicate. With a heavy sigh, Blake reached for a few bottles of euphoria from the nearby shelf and administered them directly into Snape's mouth, which was slack and unresponsive like that of a lifeless fish. It was only after Snape's expression showed the slightest hint of recovery that Blake considered his task done and prepared to leave. Just as Blake was about to exit, Snape's hoarse and weak voice stopped him in his tracks. "What was that deal you mentioned?" Snape inquired, his interest piqued by the potion Blake had given him. Blake turned around, surprised by Snape's sudden engagement. "I had intended to exchange this potion's formula for some potion ingredients from your collection. However, seeing its effect on you, I think it's best we forget about the deal," Blake explained, assuming the potion had only served to deepen Snape's melancholy. "No," Snape protested, a flicker of determination in his eyes. "Give me the potion formula, and you can have whatever ingredients you need from my collection." Blake hesitated. "While I sympathize with your plight, I cannot simply hand over the formula. However, I can provide you with a bottle of the potion each month. You must understand, Professor, consuming this potion too frequently could be detrimental." Snape, desperate for any semblance of solace, quickly agreed to Blake's terms. He understood the risks, but clung to the hope that the potion could offer him moments of escape, however fleeting, from his guilt and longing for Lily. With a newfound sense of purpose, Snape watched Blake gather the necessary ingredients from his collection. His curiosity piqued. Snape asked, "Where did you discover this potion's formula?" Blake, packing up his belongings, replied, "If I told you I researched it myself, would you believe me?" Snape, skeptical yet intrigued, admitted that despite his extensive knowledge, he had never encountered such a potion. "Given its absence from historical records, I'm inclined to believe you must have indeed discovered it yourself," Snape conceded. After finalizing their agreement, Blake left the dungeon, leaving Snape to ponder the unusual combination of ingredients Blake had chosen. Snape's knowledge of potions was vast, yet he couldn't fathom how these ingredients could be combined to create a potion. Meanwhile, Blake secluded himself in the room of requirement, tirelessly working on a potion with Nagini by his side, now in her snake form. The potion he was brewing was complex and required a high level of skill, not to mention rare ingredients that even Snape's collection could barely provide. Among these was a piece of unicorn horn, an ingredient so valuable and rare that it was almost impossible to obtain through conventional means. Blake understood the stakes. Failure was not an option, not just because of the wasted ingredients, but because of the potential breakthrough this potion represented. As he continued his meticulous work, the weight of his endeavor was not lost on him. This potion could change everything. Blake knew he faced a daunting task, finding an adult unicorn to engage in battle. Surprisingly, the challenge wasn't the confrontation itself, but locating the unicorn. As he pondered this, the potion simmering in the cauldron before him released an unusual aroma. Unlike the typical foul odors associated with potion making, this scent was pleasantly aromatic, almost enchanting. Blake mused that the term dangxiang might be a more fitting description, given that the recipe had been adapted from a traditional Dan Fang formula. Carefully, Blake decanted the potion from the cauldron into a bottle. The liquid, infused with red magic, sparkled like a ruby as it settled in the glass container. He observed a consistent quality among the potions he brewed from his particular collection. Not only were they effective, but they also possessed an aesthetically pleasing appearance, shimmering brilliantly. Blake resolved that, in the future, he would undertake the potion-making process without Dabao's presence to maintain the integrity of these creations. Holding the potion, Blake turned to Nagini with a determined look. "Nagini, I've come up with a daring plan," he announced. Nagini, curious and attentive, responded with a questioning hiss. Blake's idea was bold indeed, but he knew that with Nagini by his side, they could face any challenge that lay ahead. Together, they would embark on this quest, not just to find a unicorn, but to unlock the mysteries and potential of the magical world they were navigating. Chapter 170, The Overbearing Transformation Potion, Bloodline Reorganization. Nagini gazed at the potion in Blake's hand with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Of course, this isn't for you just yet. First, we need the real Nagini to awaken," Blake explained. Nagini's condition was indeed unique. The primary soul, which was human, needed to be awakened. Only then could she regain control over her consciousness and undergo transformation. However, her affliction with the blood curse was severe. Whenever Nagini fell asleep or voluntarily transformed into a snake, the curse would cause her human soul to slip into a deep slumber, allowing the snake soul to take over. To revert to her human form, Blake had to employ a technique akin to soul massage to awaken Nagini's primary soul. His audacious plan was to bypass the blood curse entirely, effectively sidestepping the world's magical system. The curse, after all, functioned similarly to a beast's transformation. Blake theorized that if Nagini, while awake, refrained from transforming back into a human, but instead consumed a shape-changing potion, the problem could be resolved. Previously, Nagini's transformation from human to snake was facilitated by the blood curse, a one-way data line that, once used, prevented her from reverting through the same means. Blake's potion, however, acted as a new, more potent data line. Even if the original line was temporarily inoperable, Nagini could transform at will with this new method. Moreover, this new data line was one way in the opposite direction, ensuring that all transformed beings remained in human form unless they wished to revert. The only downside was that Nagini's body might temporarily assume a snake form. Yet, Blake was confident he would eventually find a way to eliminate the blood curse, allowing Nagini's body to naturally revert to human form. This was all theoretical, but Blake was not concerned about the risks since the potion was designed for magical animals and was non-toxic. The greatest risk was that it might not work on Nagini, but Blake trusted in his system's creations. Despite the minimal risk, Blake felt it was important to seek Nagini's consent. After explaining the situation and the potential risks, including the possibility of experiencing significant pain, Nagini did not hesitate. "I do," she exclaimed, even before Blake could finish. She was desperate to escape her serpentine existence, having endured the curse's effects for too long. Every night, Nagini had to find a secluded spot to sleep, fearing the transformation that came with slumber. The blood curse had tormented her enough, and she was willing to endure any pain if it meant reclaiming her humanity. In an effort to escape the curse that condemned her to a serpentine existence, Nagini found herself clinging to a sliver of hope offered by Blake. The fear of transforming into a massive snake haunted her, sometimes keeping her awake through the night, fearing the moment she might lose her humanity completely. To others, and even to herself, she felt like a monster. But now, presented with a chance to shed her cursed form forever, hesitation was a luxury she couldn't afford. How could her situation possibly worsen? Blake saw the resolve in Nagini's eyes and instructed, "Okay, follow my instructions carefully. I will administer the potion to your snake form." "What must I do?" Nagini inquired, her voice laced with a mix of hope and anxiety. "I'll reintegrate your soul with your body, but you must not think about reverting to human form. Your only task is to stay conscious. Do nothing else but follow your body's lead." Blake explained with a calm yet firm tone. Nagini nodded, engraving his words into her mind. Her mission was clear: remain conscious and do nothing else. With a snap of his fingers, Blake facilitated the return of Nagini's soul to her snake form. As she lifted her head to gaze at Blake, her eyes sparkled with an unusual clarity, a testament to the human soul now in command. However, this dominance was fleeting. She had been minutes before the blood curse would once again plunge her consciousness into oblivion. Blake's task was daunting, yet clear. He needed to transform Nagini's snake body, now conscious with her human soul, back into her human form permanently, not merely revert the snake soul to a human appearance. To ensure Nagini remained awake through the process, Blake prepared to use his soul massage technique to extend her consciousness as long as possible. Without further delay, Blake uncapped the potion bottle. Nagini, understanding her role, lowered her head and opened her mouth wide. Blake poured the potion in its entirety into her waiting maw. A sudden, intense red light enveloped Nagini, followed by violent convulsions. She was engulfed in excruciating pain, unlike anything she had ever experienced. "Hold on, Nagini. The potion is taking effect. Just maintain your sense of self," Blake encouraged, placing his hand on her massive head. His soul massage technique significantly alleviated her pain. Blake then noticed a loud crackling noise emanating from Nagini's form. Her body was dissolving and reorganizing at an alarming rate, her soul being reshaped by an unseen force. Even his massage powers were momentarily repelled. "Stay strong, Nagini," Blake urged, his brow furrowed in concern. He hadn't anticipated the potion's aggressive nature, which was now breaking and reassembling Nagini's soul and body with ruthless efficiency. As Nagini's snakeskin tore open, releasing torrents of blood, Blake's concern turned to anticipation. "If even your blood is changing, hold on, Nagini. This could mean the complete eradication of your blood curse." Bolstered by Blake's words, Nagini found a renewed strength. I will persevere." For 5 agonizing minutes, Blake watched as Nagini's form underwent a dramatic transformation, her body and soul meticulously sculpted into a human shape. "Incredible, this potion's potency is unparalleled," he muttered to himself. Unlike other magical creatures he could simply stun and reshape, Nagini had to remain conscious throughout her transformation. The ground around them was drenched in foul-smelling blood, littered with snake scales and flesh, a gruesome sight. Yet, amidst this carnage, a figure emerged, her skin as pure and white as jade, curled up and presenting a stark contrast to the surrounding chaos. Blake, momentarily overwhelmed by the stench, quickly composed himself. "Even with Professor Babbling's facial cleanser on my side, this is a bit much," he joked to himself. Suddenly, Nagini stirred. She coughed weakly, expelling 2 pools of dark blood. After the intense ordeal, her transformation was complete, marking the end of her cursed existence as a snake and the beginning of her new life in human form. As the tainted blood hit the ground, it transformed into black smoke and vanished. Nagini slowly rose to her feet, her eyes widening in astonishment as she observed her hands. Did it work?" she stammered, disbelief coloring her tone. Blake let out a gentle sigh, his voice warm with congratulations. "Indeed, Nagini, it's not just a success, it's a monumental one." With a flick of his wand, he cast a cleaning spell, erasing all remnants of the ritual from the floor. He then removed his levitation cloak and draped it around Nagini, offering her a semblance of modesty. "I hadn't anticipated the potion to be so potent, yet the results have exceeded all expectations," Blake mused as he assisted Nagini into a chair, handing her a cup of hot tea. "You've been transformed from your serpentine form into a human one, complete with human blood. Even your soul has been refashioned into that of a human's, leaving no trace of your original snake essence. In essence, the curse that plagued you has been eradicated. Moreover," he continued, his eyes gleaming with excitement, "your physical form, though now human, retains all the capabilities of your snake form. This includes an enhanced magical and physical defense, as well as the formidable power and magical prowess you possess, set as a serpent." Nagini, in her astonishment, accidentally crushed the cup in her hand. "Does this mean I'm essentially a human with the abilities of a snake?" she asked, her voice tinged with awe. Blake chuckled, shaking his head. No, you are now a beautiful witch with the power of a serpent. You can wield your serpentine abilities at will in human form, and if you choose, you can transform back into a snake, much like an animagus. The choice is yours." Nagini's transformation was more successful than Blake had dared to hope. Unlike his initial plan to merely create a new data cable, this process had completely replaced the data line associated with the blood curse. Feeling her body carefully, Nagini realized the curse that had tormented her was truly gone. Tears welled up in her eyes as she embraced Blake, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you, Blake." Suddenly, Blake's system chimed in, detecting Nagini's overwhelming joy and rewarding him with a diamond treasure chest. However, the joy was nearly cut short as Blake struggled for breath under Nagini's tight embrace. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." Nagini quickly released him, her eyes filled with concern. Blake, gasping for air but trying to maintain his composure, reassured her. "I'm fine, really. A bit like Gandalf in durability, though not quite as sturdy." Nagini, mortified by her actions, apologized profusely. "I nearly harmed you, and yet you're so kind about it." Blake, touching his nose and noticing the blood, tried to downplay the situation. "It's nothing, really. These things happen." After Nagini helped Blake back into his levitation cloak, she had already freshened up and changed into a simple white dress, a stark contrast to her usual black attire. The transformation was not just physical. Her entire demeanor seemed brighter, free from the shadows of her past. Blake, observing the change, suggested, "We should inform Professor Dumbledore and Mr. Scamander of your recovery. It's time to consider your future and where you'll stay." Nagini, now fully human and free from her curse, looked forward to the new life ahead of her, her heart filled with gratitude and hope. Being human meant it wasn't ideal for her to remain within the school's confines. Nagini expressed her reluctance. "But I don't want to be too far away from you." Blake turned, catching the evident concern in Nagini's eyes, which sent an unexpected warmth through his heart. It seemed the potion had unintended side effects. By integrating Nagini's soul back into a singular entity, it had inadvertently fused her with the beast soul. This fusion deeply intertwined her emotions with the beast soul's inherent attachment, drawing her closer to Blake than ever before. However, this might not be entirely negative, Blake pondered as he accompanied Nagini through the corridors of Hogwarts. Nagini had expressed a desire to explore, otherwise, Blake would have opted for the dimensional gate. "The castle hasn't changed much. It looks just as it did during my last visit," Nagini observed, her voice laced with nostalgia. Decades had passed since she last roamed these halls, a time when the world was under the shadow of Grindelwald's terror. Now the atmosphere was markedly different, indicative of a more peaceful era. Blake offered a smile, his voice carrying a hopeful tone. "We always wish for the good things to remain constant, Nagini, and for the bad things to vanish swiftly," he added, understanding the weight of their past. "This applies to unpleasant memories as well. You have the chance to leave those behind, Nagini. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for you, doesn't it?" Nagini's smile broadened, filled with a sense of renewal. Yes, a new beginning. Their conversation paused before the Stone Guardian. With confidence, Blake announced, "Lemon sherbet." "The password is incorrect, young one," the Stone Guardian responded with frankness. Blake's brow furrowed in mild annoyance. The whims of the Guardian seemed to change as quickly as the wind. Perturbed, he retrieved a piece of parchment and began listing potential passwords. "Cockroach cluster, peppermint toad, fizzing whizbees?" "Actually, it's bubble tea, my boy," came Dumbledore's gentle voice from behind them. The unexpected intervention by Dumbledore, with his calm demeanor and the surprising modernity of the password, added a light-hearted twist to their adventure. It was a reminder of the ever-changing nature of Hogwarts, a place where the old and the new intertwined seamlessly, much like the journey Nagini was embarking on with Blake by her side. Chapter 171, The Power of Love Surpasses All Magic. Dumbledore set his wand aside, a look of mild astonishment on his face. He had just completed a thorough examination of Nagini, searching for any remnants of a curse. To his relief, there was no sign of the blood curse that had once plagued her. Instead, a unique form of magic had taken root within her, strengthening both her soul and body. This newfound power, undoubtedly, was a result of the potion Blake had mentioned. "No, of course, I can't claim to be as proficient in potions as Professor Snape," Blake responded with a modesty that didn't quite mask his pride. "However, I might possess a bit more creativity than him." Dumbledore chuckled. "Severus would certainly not be pleased to hear that. Are you suggesting he lacked imagination?" Blake shrugged, an implicit agreement in his gesture. Explaining the origin of the potion's formula would be complicated, so he chose to remain enigmatic. "Believe it or not, that potion is my creation, unique in this world, just as Snape could never trace the origins of his dream potion." Dumbledore, having been informed of Blake's exceptional talents by Nicholas Flamel, was not entirely surprised. Flamel, despite his 6 centuries of experience with numerous alchemists, was most captivated by Blake's boundless imagination and creativity. It was these qualities, rather than mere talent, that allowed Blake to concoct such a remarkable potion. "It's wonderful news, Nagini," Dumbledore said, his eyes twinkling. "You're free now." "Yes, Nagini," Blake added, "you're no longer bound by your past. You're free to live your life as you wish, without fear or hiding." Nagini's expression faltered. "So you're asking me to leave?" Blake and Dumbledore exchanged puzzled looks, not anticipating Nagini's sensitive reaction. Realizing her emotional state, Blake quickly reassured her. "No, not at all. We mean that you're free from the constraints that once held you back." "I can finally live the life I've always dreamed of," Nagini murmured, a sense of relief washing over her. Dumbledore, curious, asked, "Did you have any dreams before, Nagini?" Nagini hesitated. "I did, but those dreams are long gone, lost to time." Blake noticed the longing in Nagini's eyes and understood her unspoken wish. Turning to Dumbledore, he proposed, "Professor, would you object if I employed a talented assistant for my convenience store?" Dumbledore's smile widened. "Of course not, Blake. The store is yours to manage as you see fit. The school merely benefits from the profits." Facing Nagini, Blake offered, "How about it, Nagini? Would you be interested in joining me, at least for a while?" This chapter not only showcases the transformative power of magic, but also highlights the deeper magic of compassion, understanding, and the chance for a new beginning. Through their interactions, the characters demonstrate that the most potent magic of all is the magic of love and acceptance. Blake led Nagini out of Dumbledore's office, heading towards the auditorium. Nagini followed silently, her thoughts a whirlwind of gratitude and uncertainty. Breaking the silence, she softly expressed her thanks to Blake, who responded with a smile, his mood uplifted by the significant change Nagini's presence promised for his future. "No, Blake, this time my thanks are for your efforts to keep me here," Nagini clarified, her voice tinged with a mix of relief and apprehension. "The world outside has changed so much. It's no longer the one I knew. I feel out of place in this era." Blake reassured her, "It's okay, Nagini. We're friends, and I'll help you adjust. You don't need to thank me anymore, or I'll end up working overtime today. Remember, I'm your boss now." Nagini's response, laced with humor and respect, was, "Yes, as you wish, my little boss." "The boss is the boss. Why add little?" Blake retorted playfully. Their interaction was interrupted by Bob, a friend of Blake's, who was visibly excited to see Nagini. He congratulated Blake, emphasizing the collective effort that made Nagini's stay possible. Nagini, learning of Bob's contribution to Blake's experiment, expressed her sincere gratitude, which Bob humbly brushed off, insisting on being called just Bob. Blake then introduced Nagini to the convenience store and the house elf, Baker, ensuring she felt welcomed. Shortly after, Filch arrived with news that Dumbledore had arranged a dormitory for Nagini, showcasing an unusual politeness towards Blake, a testament to Blake's unique standing among students. As Bob prepared to leave, he was approached by Cassandra, who inquired about Nagini. Bob's hesitant explanation revealed Cassandra's unawareness of Nagini's situation, leading to an awkward moment for Bob, who feared Cassandra's reaction. Contrary to his expectations, Cassandra departed without further questions, leaving Bob in disbelief at the calmness of her response. Nagini's integration into Hogwarts and her role at the convenience store, owned by Blake, went smoothly. The students, accustomed to Blake's unconventional ways, accepted the addition of Nagini without much surprise, fitting seamlessly into the narrative of Blake's character-driven actions. Blake's reputation among his peers had become synonymous with beauty, whether it was due to his association with stunning girls or his own charm. As time passed and the weather grew warmer, Blake dedicated his days outside of class to a unique form of study under Dumbledore's guidance at the Shrieking Shack. Their focus was on the mysterious power of love and its potential to safely wield dark magic without harm. This concept, using love to cast dark spells, was as paradoxical as attempting to conjure a Patronus charm with hatred. The challenge was immense, and even for someone of Blake's exceptional talent, the task seemed nearly insurmountable. If Dumbledore had not demonstrated it himself, Blake might have remained skeptical about the feasibility of such a technique, dismissing it as mere theoretical speculation. Yet, when Blake successfully cast the Avada Kedavra curse, shattering a wooden target with a burst of green light, the reality of their achievement was undeniable. "It's not easy at all, is it?" Dumbledore remarked, observing Blake's success. Blake, holding his wand, voiced a realization. "Professor, I've discovered a problem. If I can cast spells with the emotion of love, do I really need to resort to dark magic? The magic of love is powerful and mysterious, and while it can be used to cast dark spells, the increase in power isn't significant. Love and dark magic are fundamentally incompatible, so it's miraculous that it works at all. However, when I apply this technique to other spells, their power is significantly enhanced." To illustrate his point, Blake cast a stunning spell, effortlessly demolishing several wooden targets. This revelation was bittersweet. Blake recognized that even without any special abilities, this method of spellcasting could rival the dark magic of the most formidable wizards. Dumbledore, pleased with Blake's understanding, announced, "You have officially graduated from the dark arts course." Blake realized Dumbledore's true intention was not to teach him dark magic, but to reveal a power greater than it, love. "So, dark magic is inconsequential?" Blake inquired. "Exactly," Dumbledore replied with a smile. "Someone like Tom, who has never known love, would only see value in dark magic, but I wanted you to see the true power of love for yourself." Dumbledore's lessons went beyond magic, emphasizing the importance of using magic wisely and not being dominated by any single aspect of it. He encouraged Blake to remember this when facing Tom again, suggesting he could use the same technique to counter the dark magic Tom sought to teach him. This experience not only expanded Blake's magical repertoire, but also deepened his understanding of the profound impact of love on the power of magic. Chapter 172, Voldemort, This Kid is Actually a Lunatic. Crucio! A high-pitched squeak followed the incantation. "Very good, Blake. You've mastered the Cruciatus Curse," exclaimed Voldemort, his spirit-possessing Quirrell with an excitement that bordered on fervor. Before him, Blake wielded his wand with a disturbing enthusiasm, subjecting a mouse to unbearable torment. The creature was twitching, foaming at the mouth, a clear sign of its suffering. Yet, Blake continued to cast the Cruciatus Curse, a twisted smile on his face, only stopping when Voldemort intervened, albeit with a look of dissatisfaction. To Voldemort, Blake's expression was the epitome of perfection. He believed he had fully unleashed the beast within Blake's heart, ensuring there was no turning back for the young wizard. "This feeling is exhilarating. I can't wait to use it on people," Blake declared, his anticipation chilling. "No, you mustn't use it on people just yet." Voldemort was taken aback by the intensity of Blake's newfound savagery, even contemplating its use on humans. "Why not? The rats. They're simply not satisfying enough." Blake's eyes gleamed with a bloodthirsty light. "Who do you wish to use it on now?" Voldemort inquired, a hint of concern in his voice. "So many people at the school," Blake mused, his eagerness palpable. "No, you're risking expulsion. I can't afford to lose you yet." "Blake," Voldemort cautioned. "Patience. The release after extreme endurance is the most satisfying," he added, hastily dissuading Blake from acting on his impulses. Blake was Voldemort's ace against Dumbledore, and he couldn't afford to have him exposed at this juncture. "As long as I'm cautious, I can always use the memory charm afterwards. I specifically learned it for this purpose," Blake said, his grin taking on a maniacal edge. Voldemort, serious now, questioned, "It took you this long to come to me, not just because you were learning the Cruciatus Curse, but because you also took the time to master the memory charm." "Exactly. What's the point of learning such spells if not to use them on people? I just need to be careful with the memory charm from time to time." "Enough," Voldemort interjected. "Your raw magical talent destines you for great power. However, I have no desire to mentor a lunatic devoid of reason." Blake fell silent, finding it ironic to be labeled a lunatic by Voldemort himself. "Take this, and only return after you've learned it," Voldemort said, handing over a piece of parchment. "Remember, you must never experiment with dark magic on people within the school. If I discover you've used dark magic on anyone, I will cease teaching you any further dark arts." Blake adopted a look of feigned horror. "I promise not to, Professor." After Voldemort departed, satisfied, the crazed look on Blake's face vanished. I might have overacted a bit today," he mused, turning his attention to the mouse, which was still foaming at the mouth. Kneeling down, he prodded the mouse with his wand. "It's not seriously harmed. It's just temporarily incapacitated from the excitement," Blake reasoned. He had used the Cruciatus Curse, but in such a way that it induced an overwhelming sensation rather than lasting harm, a fine line between extreme pleasure and pain that even Voldemort failed to detect. Standing, Blake unfolded the parchment. "Avada Kedavra?" "Now, this is interesting," he murmured. In the days that followed, Blake's routine consisted of attending classes by day and deceiving Voldemort by night with dark magic disguised as benign enchantments. Voldemort, both enamored and intimidated by Blake's aptitude for the dark arts, saw him as a powerful weapon against Dumbledore. Yet, His jealousy of Blake's talent was undeniable. Most importantly, he recognized the madness within Blake, attributing it to past oppression. Little did he know, Blake's lunacy was far more complex and calculated than he could ever imagine. Voldemort was contemplating the future, considering how to manage the unpredictable nature of Sumall, ni as wild as Blake. Time marched on, and by May, Blake's exceptional aptitude for learning had left Voldemort without any new dark arts to teach him. Instead, Voldemort had him practice the spells he already knew over and over, knowing well that the more one delves into dark magic, the harder it is to escape its grasp. To Voldemort, Blake was already deeply ensnared. One evening in mid-May, Blake arrived at the usual secret classroom for his nightly lesson. However, this time, Quirrell didn't prompt him to practice dark magic as he typically would. Instead, Quirrell had prepared tea and was waiting for Blake in an armchair, a departure from their usual routine. "What kind of dark magic are we practicing tonight?" Blake inquired, expecting the usual. No practice tonight," Quirrell responded, causing a look of disappointment to cross Blake's face. He was visibly upset at the prospect of not being able to wield dark magic immediately. "Sit down first, Blake," Quirrell suggested, a hint of excitement in his voice. Blake, still somewhat disgruntled, took a seat. "As you've probably realized, you've learned all the dark magic I have to teach," Quirrell explained. "In other words, I have nothing left to offer you." Blake pondered this for a moment before replying, "Then, it's fine. I can continue to practice what I've learned and look for opportunities to learn more in the future." Quirrell chuckled. "And where do you suppose you'll find these opportunities? Dark magic is feared worldwide. It's not something that's freely taught, and truly, how many are there who truly excel in it?" Blake fell silent, frustration evident on his face. "Professor, what do you suggest then?" Blake asked, his curiosity piqued. "Since you've brought this up, you must have an idea of where I can learn more about the dark arts." Quirrell smiled knowingly. "Indeed I do. There's only one person in the world who is a master of dark magic, someone from whom you can learn deeper, more powerful spells. And the price for this knowledge is quite small." Blake looked suspicious. "A small price? What kind of price?" "You only need to pledge your allegiance, Blake," Quirrell revealed. "Swear loyalty to that lord, and he will generously share his knowledge with those who serve him." "That's it? Just pledge my loyalty?" Blake asked, surprised yet intrigued. "Yes, just your allegiance. I'll introduce you," Quirrell said, pleased with how the conversation was unfolding. Quirrell had no doubts about Blake's decision. A young mind, already tainted by the allure of power, would hardly resist such an offer. "I pledge my allegiance, Professor Quirrell," Blake declared. "So who is this lord? And when can you introduce me?" Before Quirrell could answer, a hoarse voice emanated from the back of his head. "Okay, Quirrell, let me talk to him." Blake's eyes widened in shock, and Quirrell was equally taken aback, not expecting his master to intervene so directly. Obliging his master's wish, Quirrell stood and began to unravel his turban, revealing his bald head. As he slowly turned around, Blake saw a terrifying face emerge on the back of Quirrell's head, a face that would change everything. The once smooth surface of his head, now bizarrely contorted as a face emerged, its mouth opening to exhale a chilling puff of white air. Witnessing this, Blake felt a surge of horror. He thought to himself that death might be preferable to such a grotesque existence. What kind of life was this, if it could even be called living? "Good evening, Blake," the face said in a raspy voice, its appearance unsettling. Who are you?" Blake asked, his voice laced with suspicion. "How dare you? Show some respect. This is the Dark Lord," Quirrell interjected angrily. "Enough, Quirrell. Let me handle this," Voldemort commanded, his tone icy. Quirrell visibly trembled, clearly intimidated by Voldemort's displeasure. "Blake, believe it or not, we're actually acquainted," Voldemort continued. "I've been the one using Quirrell to teach you the dark arts recently." Blake scrutinized the grotesque face before him, noting the absence of a nose, a signature trait of Voldemort's. "Are you the mysterious person everyone's been talking about?" Blake ventured a guess, recalling how Quirrell had referred to Voldemort as the Lord and the world's foremost authority on dark magic. "During my time, they dared not even utter my name," Voldemort said with a hint of pride. "But how did you guess?" he inquired. "Professor Quirrell mentioned that the Lord is the most knowledgeable person in the world regarding dark magic, and since you're known as the greatest dark wizard, Blake explained. Sharp as ever, Blake. You're the brightest student I've encountered at Hogwarts in years, Voldemort remarked, clearly pleased by Blake's deduction. Now that you're aware of my identity and having heard Quirrell's introduction, what will you choose? Will you pledge your loyalty to me? Voldemort posed the question, his tone suggesting that Blake's answer held significant weight. Chapter 173, Blake's Allegiance and Dumbledore's Bewilderment. Blake boldly declared, "If you can continue to teach me the dark arts, then pledging my allegiance is a small price to pay." He paused, a hint of uncertainty in his voice as he added, "But Professor Quirrell mentioned there's nothing more for me to learn, and you've been my mentor thus far." The room fell into an awkward silence. Quirrell was taken aback, wondering how Blake could make such a statement. It seemed to question whether Voldemort had run out of knowledge to impart to Blake, and, more critically, Quirrell had indeed suggested there was nothing left to teach, which could infuriate Voldemort. Quirrell feared not for Blake, but for himself, knowing well the consequences of displeasing his master. As expected, Voldemort's fury was palpable, not because of Blake's boldness, but because Blake doubted the extent of his knowledge. Yet, what Blake said held an uncomfortable truth. Voldemort had nearly exhausted his repertoire of dark magic with Blake, something he hadn't anticipated. If not for a strategic shift to reinforce previous lessons, Voldemort's resources might have been depleted even sooner. Despite the complexity of his dark arts, Blake's capacity to learn at an astonishing pace had caught him off guard. Never before had Voldemort encountered someone who could master complex spells in mere hours, challenging even his vast knowledge. Caught between indignation and speechlessness, Voldemort experienced a rare moment of vulnerability. Ding! The emotion of becoming angry from embarrassment is detected, a voice announced, awarding Blake a golden treasure chest for provoking such a reaction. Quirrell, despite his fear, attempted to salvage the situation. "Before fully pledging your loyalty, do you expect the master to reveal all his secrets?" he said, risking Voldemort's wrath to preserve his master's dignity. Blake seemed to accept Quirrell's explanation, and Voldemort, regaining his composure, seized the opportunity to entice Blake further. "I possess deeper and more powerful secrets, reserved for those truly loyal to me," Voldemort said, his voice laced with temptation. "So Blake, while I've always admired your talent, I cannot share these secrets unless you join us." Blake responded with a smile. "In that case, I am willing to join your ranks, great Dark Lord." "Are you certain?" Voldemort inquired, his interest piqued. "Frankly, I'm not fond of the current predicament," Blake confessed. "It feels like I have no choice. Joining you promises access to greater power and knowledge, but refusing means I cannot leave. I dislike not having control over my own decisions." Voldemort's response was a grotesque grin. Blake's directness, rather than immediate compliance, reassured him. He understood that geniuses like Blake harbored a natural arrogance. Blake's candid expression of dissatisfaction suggested he wasn't concealing ulterior motives, which put Voldemort at ease. In the world of the ambitious and the powerful, genuine grievances were preferable to silent compliance, hinting at deeper layers of strategy and intent. "There is nothing in this world that can be obtained without paying a price," Voldemort declared, his voice carrying a weight that seemed to echo around the room. "Although you may not like it, this is the price you must pay. However, you will soon realize the wisdom in joining our ranks. You will gain everything you desire, including eternal life. I have ventured further down the path of immortality than anyone before me. Why else do you think I am still alive? Because no one can kill me. I am immortal." Blake's pupils narrowed sharply at Voldemort's words, a reaction that did not go unnoticed by the Dark Lord. In truth, Voldemort had little in the way of dark arts to teach Blake. To ensure Blake's allegiance, he played his ace card. In Voldemort's mind, the allure of eternal life was irresistible, especially to someone as power-hungry as Blake. Blake's similarities to his younger self were uncanny. His fascination with the dark arts, his adeptness at navigating relationships with both classmates and professors. However, Blake had one advantage Voldemort never had, a connection with Dumbledore. This, Voldemort believed, was a powerful leverage point. "Great Dark Lord, I am willing to join your camp," Blake stated with a sincerity that was carefully measured. His words were deliberately chosen, indicating his willingness to join, but not necessarily to pledge undying loyalty. Joining was one thing. It did not preclude the possibility of leaving. A look of satisfaction crossed Voldemort's face once more. He believed that Blake, having been tempted by the promise of immortality, was now fully committed to his cause. "Very well, Blake. Currently, I am without a physical body, which limits my ability to demonstrate many powerful spells. However, once I regain my physical form, there will be no such limitations." Voldemort smoothly transitioned the conversation to his next objective. Blake, playing his part, inquired politely, "Great Dark Lord, what is required for you to regain your physical body?" Voldemort's response was accompanied by a sly smile. "Are you familiar with the Philosopher's Stone?" "Of course," Blake replied, his interest piqued. "The Philosopher's Stone is the pinnacle of alchemy, capable of transmuting base metals into gold and producing the elixir of life." "Do you need the Philosopher's Stone?" Blake ventured. "Indeed," Voldemort confirmed. "However, as far as I am aware, the only existing Philosopher's Stone is in the possession of the legendary alchemist, Nicholas Flamel. How do we intend to find him?" "There's no need for that," Voldemort revealed with a grin. "The Philosopher's Stone is here at Hogwarts." Blake expressed his surprise. Could it be located in the forbidden corridors on the 4th floor, as mentioned by Professor Dumbledore? "Yes, that is precisely where the Philosopher's Stone is hidden," Voldemort confirmed. Blake, puzzled, questioned the logic behind this decision. "But why here at Hogwarts? Gringotts is reputed to be the safest place in the wizarding world. I recall reading about a break-in at Gringotts, yet nothing was stolen." Voldemort explained. "The Philosopher's Stone was indeed stored at Gringotts until recently. I had Quirrell attempt a theft, but he was too late. The vault was already emptied." "So, Dumbledore moved the Philosopher's Stone from Gringotts to Hogwarts?" Blake deduced. "Exactly. Dumbledore's arrogance led him to believe it would be safer under his own watch. Little does he know how much I've accomplished right under his nose. He can't stop me," Voldemort boasted, his confidence soaring with the knowledge he had acquired. "All it takes is one opportunity, one moment of oversight. With Quirrell's help, we can steal the Philosopher's Stone," Voldemort plotted, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "So, what do you need me to do?" Blake asked, understanding that Voldemort would not have shared such information without requiring his assistance. "It's refreshing to converse with someone as astute as you," Voldemort remarked, preparing to enlist Blake's help in his grand scheme. "Don't worry, Brass." The voice was calm, yet carried an undercurrent of urgency. "Although Dumbledore may be seen as an old fool, he possesses considerable skills. Given my current condition, it's not wise to act impulsively." Blake nodded in understanding. "So, our only option now is to wait?" "Exactly. Wait. Do not take any action without my direct command. I will notify you when the time is right." "Understood. You don't need to worry about me visiting anymore. Once you've fully recovered, you can begin to teach me more advanced dark magic," Blake said, a hint of eagerness in his voice. "And the secret to eternal life." The promise hung in the air, tantalizing. With this new understanding, Blake felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The knowledge that he wouldn't have to endure nightly visits was a relief. Despite the allure of uncovering hidden treasures, the thought of spending every evening with someone whose presence was as unpleasant as the smell of garlic was unbearable. Meanwhile, in the library, Hermione was engrossed in her studies when she was suddenly interrupted by a familiar voice. "What are you doing?" Blake asked, his tone teasing. Annoyed, Hermione snapped back. "I'm studying for the exams. They're only a few weeks away." "Studying?" Blake sat down beside her, a bored expression on his face. "Why? Shouldn't you have learned everything in class by now?" The system chimed in Hermione's mind, detecting her frustration and awarding her a silver treasure chest for her emotional turmoil. Trying to contain her anger, Hermione retorted, "Not everyone can rely solely on their memory, you know." "Sorry, but having a good memory does give you certain advantages," Blake replied, unfazed. Hermione took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, but her patience was wearing thin. "Just leave me alone. I need to study," she said, her voice strained. Blake, undeterred, teased her further about wanting to check her transfiguration essay, only to be promptly kicked out of the library. As he was leaving, he encountered Dumbledore, who greeted him with a knowing smile. Dumbledore held out a coin that shimmered with a transformation spell. "You said to come to the library whenever this coin heated up. What's the matter?" Dumbledore inquired, his tone light but curious. Blake shrugged nonchalantly. "Oh, nothing much. I just agreed to join Voldemort's ranks tonight, becoming an honorable Death Eater." Dumbledore's expression remained unreadable, a master at concealing his thoughts, leaving Blake to wonder what the wise old wizard was truly thinking. Chapter 174. Dog Thief Blake. Damn you! Dumbledore stared at Blake, utterly bewildered. It was clear to him that Blake could never be a Death Eater, especially since Voldemort was merely using him for his own ends. "So, he finally revealed his intentions to you tonight?" Dumbledore inquired. Blake nodded affirmatively. "Indeed, he had to make his move sooner rather than later, or else he'd have nothing left to teach me about the dark arts." Dumbledore was left speechless once more. It was astonishing how Blake, despite his dubious nature, managed to master all the dark arts that Voldemort had spent years accumulating in just a few months. "I must admit, the sight of a second face on Quirrell's bald head was quite unsettling," Blake remarked, vividly recalling the encounter. After a moment of contemplation, Dumbledore asked, "He must have invested a great deal to win you over. But," Blake interjected, "I realized that too easily agreeing could raise suspicions. Just as I was pondering how to join his ranks more convincingly, he unexpectedly upped the ante." "Upped the ante?" Dumbledore frowned. "His main lure was the dark arts, but you've nearly mastered all he knows. How could he possibly offer more? Did he give you a blank promise?" Blake expressed his uncertainty. "I'm not sure if it's a false promise. He mentioned that once he regains his physical form, he would not only teach me more powerful dark arts, but also share the secret to eternal life." Dumbledore's expression turned grave. "The secret to immortality? Did he truly say that?" "Yes, he claimed to be further along the path to immortality than anyone else," Blake added. "Eternal life," Dumbledore mused, his brow furrowed. "It's possible he has discovered some unique method. This could explain why he didn't die after the curse backfired." Dumbledore felt as though he was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. The next morning, Blake was sprawled across a table in the auditorium, furiously working on his homework, filled with indignation. He had aspired to match wits with the Dark Lord, only to be reminded that homework was inescapable. "Curse it! The audacity!" he muttered under his breath. Nagini, ever thoughtful, brought him a cup of milk tea and a plate of cream puffs from the convenience store. "Where were you last night? Skipping homework?" Cedric asked with a smirk. "Cedric, don't make me tell Nagini to cut you off," Blake threatened half-jokingly. "I believe you," Cedric replied, quickly silencing himself. Cedric, however, was persistent. "Ahem, if I do your homework for a fee, could I get a discount at the store?" "No thanks," Blake replied, clearly annoyed. Yet Cedric was undeterred, eager for a discount and more magical snacks. "I could help you with your transfiguration essay," he offered. "Don't worry about the handwriting," Cedric continued. "I can use a spell to make it look just like yours." But before he could finish, a parchment filled with text was thrust in front of Blake. "Here, take this. And don't bother me with such trivial matters again," Cassandra said, folding her arms and holding her head high. "But you write for him every day," Hannah pointed out. Cassandra's face flushed with embarrassment as she was caught in the act. "Hannah, you!" "Thank you so much, Cassandra. Take whatever you want. It's on me," Blake said, gratefully taking the parchment from her. Cedric examined the content and handwriting, realizing it was indeed a transfiguration essay, indistinguishable from Blake's own writing. It appeared there was no need for a transformation curse after all. This meant Blake didn't need his help with homework, thanks to the daily assistance from Cassandra. Realizing Cassandra's familiarity with Blake's handwriting suggested this wasn't their first collaboration, Cedric felt a pang of jealousy. How on earth did he manage that? Damn, I want in. Cedric couldn't hide his envy as he watched Blake surrounded by a group of girls, each offering their help with different subjects. "Blake, here's the charms pap. Cho Chang said, handing over a piece of parchment. Almost simultaneously, Hermione, with a hint of resignation in her voice, offered her assistance with the history of magic. The scene prompted a series of surprised glances among the girls, each realizing they weren't the only ones helping Blake with his homework. Cedric, standing nearby, felt a pang of jealousy so intense it surprised even him, a typically composed individual. Is this guy also a master of time management, or what? How does he do it? I wish girls would help me with my homework, too, he thought, barely containing his frustration. Marcus, noticing Cedric's barely concealed envy, tapped him on the shoulder and remarked, "You might want to manage your expressions better, Cedric. Your face is a textbook example of jealousy." "Yeah, because I am incredibly jealous," Cedric admitted, his eyes practically glowing green with envy. Marcus sympathized. "I get it, Cedric. I feel the same. We all do." Looking around, Cedric saw he wasn't alone in his feelings. Many of the male students shared his astonishment and envy. As breakfast concluded, Blake proudly announced that he had completed all the homework entirely on my own strength. No one could argue with that. After all, being able to enlist others' help, especially that of several beautiful girls, was a testament to his own unique form of strength. The final exams arrived amidst a sweltering heat wave, making the already daunting task of concentrating even more challenging. The absence of fans in the castle only added to the discomfort. After completing the last exam, the history of magic, Blake was exhausted. "Why won't Cuthbert Binns accept early submissions?" he complained. "Because the exam had only started 10 minutes ago," Hermione responded, frustration evident in her voice. "What's the big deal? I finished writing." Blake shrugged, already contemplating how to conjure an air conditioner using alchemy. Hermione was at a loss for words, especially after comparing answers with Blake and realizing he had managed to correctly complete the entire test paper in such a short time. "I didn't even need to memorize the Werewolf Code of Conduct in 1637 or the Elf Rebellion," she said, bewildered by Blake's performance. Blake looked at her incredulously. "What? You didn't memorize all of the history of magic, but you studied for so long?" Hermione was too annoyed to respond, and Blake's phone suddenly chimed with notifications, amusing him further. "Well, since the exams are over, we have a week to rest. What could be more pleasant than that? Let's not worry about the results until next week. So, how about we go to Hogsmeade?" Upon their arrival at the Hog's Head Inn, Aberforth Dumbledore scrutinized the group, particularly the girls following Blake. Glad to see your orientation is normal," he remarked, half-jokingly cautioning Blake not to claim they were all just friends. Blake, slightly embarrassed, assured him they were indeed all good friends. Aberforth led them to a private compartment, away from the pub's usual dark wizard clientele, and suggested they celebrate the end of their exams with butterbeer. Hermione started to protest, citing their age, but Blake interjected, eagerly requesting a round of butterbeer for everyone. Aberforth, with a hint of amusement, agreed, reminding them to make sure they had enough money to cover the bill. Blake's penchant for the unconventional was something that Hermione found intriguing, if not a bit overwhelming at times. The thought of having another Dumbledore around was daunting enough. As they sat together, Blake tried to ease Hermione's hesitation about trying butterbeer. "Oh, come on. It's just butterbeer." "Really, what's the difference between it having alcohol content or not?" he coaxed. "Okay," Hermione conceded, her curiosity about the legendary wizard's drink getting the better of her. Cassandra, who had been quietly observing, set down her satchel and asked, "Blake, do you have any plans for the summer vacation?" Blake leaned back, a thoughtful look crossing his face. "I do have some plans," he began, counting off on his fingers. "First, I plan to visit Mrs. Marion. I wanted to go last Christmas, but something came up unexpectedly. Then, I want to spend some time with Mr. Scamander. He has a collection of cute, fantastic beasts, and after that, I plan to go out and explore." Blake's mind wandered to the secret realm hidden within his system warehouse, a place he eagerly anticipated exploring. However, he chose not to share these details with Cassandra and the others. Soon, their butterbeer arrived. The drink, with its clear yellow hue topped with a layer of white froth, resembled Muggle beer, but carried a richer, more mellow wheat aroma. Hermione and the others quickly became enamored with the unique beverage. As they pondered their holiday plans, an owl swooped in through the window, landing squarely in front of Blake. He carefully removed the note from its beak and unfolded it to reveal a single word, tonight. "Who's looking for you?" Cassandra inquired, her curiosity piqued. "It's nothing, just a small matter," Blake replied, slipping the note back into his pocket with a nonchalant air. Cassandra, sensing Blake's reluctance to discuss it further, didn't press him. Instead, she returned to her butterbeer, stealing glances at Blake from time to time. After a while, she gathered her courage and began, "If you're going to travel during the holidays, maybe you can." Her words were abruptly cut off by another owl's arrival, causing Blake to offer her an apologetic smile as he took the new note. This one read, "I'm going to the Ministry of Magic today, and I seem very interested. You help me look after Harry." Blake felt a wave of dizziness as he read the note. He had just finished his exams and was looking forward to some relaxation. The idea of looking after Harry, especially when he was trying to avoid any trouble, was the last thing he wanted. Glancing at the girls who were still engrossed in their conversation, and then at the owl, Blake sighed. "Uncle Aberforth?" he called out when Aberforth came in to deliver dessert. "What's up, Blake? Want more drinks?" Aberforth asked. "No, it's about that spell you mentioned before, the one that sends a letter with a whoosh," Blake explained. Aberforth, puzzled at first, realized Blake was referring to the Patronus charm used for sending messages. "That's Dumbledore's creation. You should learn it from him," Aberforth suggested. "But I need it urgently. Can you teach me now?" Blake pressed. Aberforth hesitated, explaining the complexity of the charm and the necessity of having a Patronus as a foundation, which Blake had yet to learn. However, before he could finish, a pure white phoenix Patronus appeared in front of Blake, stunning Aberforth into silence. Blake pointed to the phoenix and asked innocently, "The Patronus charm, is this what you mean?" Aberforth was taken aback, both impressed and shocked that someone so young could master such an advanced spell. Despite his initial reluctance, it was clear that Blake was no ordinary student. To impart the technique of using a Patronus to convey messages to Blake was a decision rooted in the practices of the Order of the Phoenix. Given Blake's familiarity with the Patronus charm, it seemed appropriate to teach him this advanced application. "Although you're acquainted with the Patronus charm, this will be your first attempt at using it for communication," Aberforth explained. "Even after you've successfully encoded your message, there's a chance of failure if the Patronus cannot be summoned properly. This task is somewhat challenging." Before Aberforth could finish his thought, a pure white phoenix Patronus soared through the wall, heading towards the castle. Aberforth watched, mouth agape, as the phoenix disappeared from sight, taking a long moment to collect his thoughts. "Jay?" Aberforth finally managed, still in disbelief. "Yes, but you were correct, Uncle Aberforth. This spell is quite difficult," Blake admitted with a hint of pride. "It took me longer to master than the Patronus charm itself." Wait a minute!" Aberforth suddenly interrupted, a realization dawning on him. "How long did you say you've been practicing the Patronus charm?" About a minute," Blake replied, his tone uncertain. His journey with the Patronus charm began in the orphanage, relying solely on his recollection of the spell from books he had read in his previous life. To his surprise, it worked on his first attempt. He hadn't really paid attention to the exact duration. Opting for a minute seemed less boastful than admitting it only took a few seconds. Yet, Blake seemed oblivious to the fact that even a minute was an astonishingly short time to master such a complex spell. Aberforth, reflecting on his own lengthy struggle to learn the Patronus charm, could hardly believe what he was hearing. In a daze, he grabbed a bottle of fire whiskey and took several large gulps. "Oh, don't mind me. I'm fine, really," Aberforth muttered, trying to reassure himself. Ding! Emotional distress detected. A voice chimed in Aberforth's head, followed by another notification. Ding! Congratulations to the host for acquiring a silver treasure chest. Meanwhile, in the headmaster's office at Hogwarts, the same pure white phoenix Patronus that had left Aberforth in awe entered through the wall, signifying the successful delivery of Blake's message. Chapter 175, Quirrell's Mockery and Blake's Secret Adventure. Dumbledore, with a thoughtful stroke of his beard, mused over the message he had just received. It was clear that Blake had seen through his intentions once again. Dumbledore had hoped to use Blake to ensure Harry's safety, intending for Blake to accompany Harry and ultimately let Harry face Voldemort. Yet, Blake's message revealed that Voldemort had anticipated this plan as well, forcing Blake to stay with Professor Quirrell for the evening and play the part of a misguided villain. Despite the regret in potentially casting a shadow over Harry's heart, Blake assured Dumbledore of his commitment to the plan, aiming to let Harry confront Voldemort directly. Meanwhile, Blake and his friends enjoyed their time in Hogsmeade, returning to Hogwarts through a secret passage by 8 in the evening. After parting ways with his friends, Blake encountered Cassandra, who noticed a particular excitement in his eyes, reminiscent of their adventure in the Forbidden Forest. Blake, caught off guard by Cassandra's observation, realized he had been less cautious lately. Yet, he couldn't help but feel a sense of liberation in sharing his true desires for excitement and adventure, far removed from the personas he adopted in front of Dumbledore or Voldemort. Cassandra, seeing the genuine thrill in Blake's eyes, expressed a desire to join him on his adventures. Despite her enthusiasm, Blake firmly declined, citing the danger involved. Cassandra, undeterred, playfully insisted that one day Blake would be the one asking her to accompany him. At 10 o'clock, Blake met with Professor Quirrell, his demeanor shifting to the mask he often wore, hiding the excitement that had earlier shown in his eyes. Quirrell, taken aback by the occasional glimpses of madness in Blake's gaze, recognized the dangerous fervor of a young lunatic. Quirrell informed Blake that Voldemort had instructed them to proceed with their plans that night. Blake, curious about Snape's recent lack of surveillance on Quirrell, speculated that his own actions might have diverted Snape's attention. Quirrell, seizing the opportunity presented by Dumbledore's absence at the Ministry of Magic, expressed eagerness to take advantage of the night, hinting at a sinister plot unfolding under the cover of darkness. Blake, while outwardly aligning with Quirrell's plans, harbored his own complex feelings and strategies. His interactions with Cassandra and Quirrell revealed a young man torn between the thrill of adventure and the weight of the roles he played in the larger battle against Voldemort. Blake's face was also miraculously rosier, as if he had been dreaming of something pleasant. Quirrell and Blake made their way quietly to the fourth-floor corridor. Along the way, Blake keenly observed that they did not encounter anyone. It was as if even the ghosts had vanished. He suspected that Dumbledore might have intentionally cleared the area to give Quirrell an opportunity. Quirrell, however, seemed oblivious to these anomalies, his excitement undiminished. He produced a miniature version of a harp and silently unlocked the door in front of them with the unlocking charm. "Go in and be quiet," Quirrell ordered. Blake nodded, and Quirrell pushed open the wooden door. As they entered the dark room, a tall figure suddenly leaped up, emitting a foul stench. It was the three-headed dog, Fluffy, ready to pounce. Quirrell hastily plucked the strings of the harp in his hand, and soon the ferocious beast began to droop its eyelids. Within seconds, Fluffy collapsed to the ground, fast asleep. Blake curiously observed Fluffy, wondering if there was a way to eliminate such a fatal weakness through evolution. His thoughts were interrupted by Quirrell's voice. "Don't waste time. Come here." Quirrell had opened a trapdoor that Fluffy had been guarding, revealing a dark hole below. The harp now played automatically beside Fluffy, keeping the beast asleep. "Jump down. There's a devil's snare below, but don't worry about getting hurt," Quirrell said before jumping down himself. Blake peered into the hole, his pupils turning yellow as he partially transformed his body, a skill of druids. This temporary transformation allowed him to see clearly in the dark. Below, Quirrell was entangled in the devil's snare, but a flash of fire from his wand made the plant's tentacles retreat. Blake, cautious as ever, dropped a bone flute by the door before taking a deep leap. Activating the levitation function of his cloak, he descended slowly. Thanks to his druidic abilities, the devil's snare did not attempt to ensnare him. Landing gently, he saw Quirrell excitedly looking down the passage ahead. "What are you laughing at, Professor?" Blake asked. Quirrell, with a smile tinged with madness, replied, "I laugh at Dumbledore's foolishness, Snape's lack of wisdom. They've given me the perfect opportunity to be here, If only they had kept a closer eye on me for one more day. Soon, the master will be resurrected, and I will get what I desire. Suddenly, Quirrell shuddered, a look of horror crossing his face. Blake surmised that Voldemort had just rebuked him mentally. Quirrell, now silent, led the way down the stone corridor, which sloped downwards, with water seeping through its walls. They soon heard a rustling sound and arrived at a brightly lit room. The ceiling was alive with countless little birds, shimmering as they flew around. On the other side of the room was a locked door. Quirrell explained, "Those are keys transformed into birds by Flitwick. We need to fly up there on broomsticks and find the correct one among them." He then turned to Blake. "That's something you're good at, isn't it?" Blake glanced at the ceiling, noting a bird with wings as sharp as a knife, then at the broom in the corner. He knew what he had to do. Blake had no interest in the traditional approach of navigating through the challenges that lay ahead. The thought of what his broom might endure, not to mention the countless minor injuries he could accumulate, was far from appealing. So, when he suggested an alternative method, it piqued curiosity. "We still have a second option," Blake mentioned casually. As he walked towards the gate, Quirrell's annoyance bubbled up, mistaking Blake's initiative for disobedience. "This door cannot be opened with the unlocking charm," he protested. Blake chuckled, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Who said anything about using the lock-picking charm? I have a much quicker solution." With a flourish, he pulled a bowtruckle from his pocket. The creature, named Porgy, squinted against the sudden exposure to light. "Would you mind unlocking this for us?" Blake asked, offering a woodlouse as incentive. Porgy, delighted by the treat, scurried towards the lock, inserting its long, sharp nails into the keyhole. Within seconds, the door swung open, much to Quirrell's astonishment. "See? Isn't this easier than rummaging through a pile of keys?" Blake remarked, rewarding Porgy with another woodlouse. Quirrell's surprise quickly turned to realization, understanding why his master had insisted on including Blake in their mission. This method was undeniably more efficient than any he could have employed alone. The next challenge was Professor McGonagall's giant chessboard. Quirrell, familiar with the rules, had already devised a strategy for victory, albeit a simplistic one. "Do you understand chess?" he asked Blake. "I know a thing or two," Blake replied nonchalantly, dismissing the idea of taking a knight's place on the board. "But why waste time playing chess when we have other options?" Quirrell was perplexed. "Because it's the only way through," he insisted, unaware of Blake's ingenuity. "Is it, though?" Blake countered, raising his wand. "Confundo." Quirrell's skepticism was palpable. "The confusion charm won't work on." Before he could finish, the enemy king removed his crown, tossing it aside as the chess pieces cleared a path for them, and the door at the back of the room opened silently. How is this possible?" Quirrell stammered, "Witness, sing the impossible." "Sometimes, the issue isn't the spell but the power behind it," Blake explained with a smirk. "Besides, I'm not particularly fond of following the rules." As they progressed, Quirrell couldn't help but feel a mix of admiration and frustration towards Blake. His presence had accelerated their progress significantly, but it also sowed seeds of doubt in Quirrell's mind. When their master was resurrected, would he, Quirrell, truly be the one to receive the greatest credit, or would it be Blake? Chapter 176. I think this magic mirror is slandering me. Blake stepped into the next room, his brows furrowed in disgust as a foul stench permeated the air. Without hesitation, he turned on his heel and left, much to Quirrell's surprise. Moments later, Blake re-entered, this time with a bubblehead charm protecting him from the odor. Why resort to a troll? They're smelly and difficult to manage. A niffler, for instance, would be far more effective, Blake mused aloud. It could burrow its horns into any intruder's rear and detonate. Quirrell's complexion paled at the suggestion. He had chosen trolls for their simplicity and his own proficiency, not out of any desire to genuinely safeguard the Philosopher's Stone. The idea of a creature that could cause such personal harm was far from his intentions. With the bubblehead charm in place, Blake re-entered the troll's chamber. To his amusement, the same troll he had previously tamed was there, looking at him with a vacant expression. Recognizing its master, the troll made no move to attack. "The soul is out of body," Blake commanded, a smirk playing on his lips. Knock yourself out, thanks. With a clumsy swing, the troll complied, knocking itself unconscious. Quirrell, who had followed Blake into the room, was taken aback by the unnecessary brutality. A simple imperious curse would have sufficed for temporary control, he thought. However, Blake had his reasons. Ensuring the troll was incapacitated was a precaution to protect Harry Potter, who was also navigating the challenges. The last thing needed was for the young hero to be squashed by the troll before reaching the end. With the troll now a non-threat, Blake proceeded to the next challenge, one set by Professor Snape. The room contained a single table, upon which sat 7 bottles of varying shapes. Blake quickly sealed the room behind them, eager to rid himself of the troll's stench. He then dispelled the bubblehead charm and cleansed himself with a spell. A purple flame sprang up, sealing both the entrance and the exit, trapping Blake and Quirrell temporarily. Quirrell picked up a piece of parchment that lay on the table, reading aloud the riddle that would guide them through Snape's challenge. The riddle spoke of danger and safety, of potions that could either advance their journey or send them back. It offered clues to discern which potion would lead them forward and which would spell their doom. As Quirrell pondered the riddle, Blake, without hesitation, picked up a bottle from the corner and smashed it on the ground. The potion within corroded the stone floor upon contact. "What are you doing?" Quirrell exclaimed, his thought process disrupted by Blake's sudden action. Blake frowned, his patience thinning. "Please, focus. We need to solve this puzzle, not dwell on the potential hazards. Let's use the clues provided to find our way forward." Together, they analyzed the riddle, piecing together the clues to identify the potions that would lead them safely through Snape's challenge. With logic and a bit of intuition, they navigated the puzzle, setting their sights on the challenges that lay ahead, all the while ensuring their actions remained aligned with their ultimate goal, the protection of the Philosopher's Stone. "Do you really want an explanation?" Blake asked, his tone laced with impatience. "It's not that you're incapable of figuring it out, but adhering to their rules is simply a waste of time. Who knows when Dumbledore will return? We don't have the luxury to dawdle." Quirrell watched in dismay as Blake carelessly dropped another potion bottle, the corners of his mouth twitching slightly in frustration. You can't do this," he protested. "We need to find the potion that allows us to pass through the fire gate after drinking it. If you discard all the correct potions, we'll be trapped here." "Why bother with such fuss? Aren't these potions easy to distinguish? Oh, this one is also poison," Blake mused, nonchalantly smashing another bottle. "Are you really sure?" Quirrell low, as terrified, unsure of where Blake's confidence stemmed from. The correct potion could only be identified by sight, and a mistake could mean death by poison or being consumed by the flames guarding the door. "Don't worry, Professor Quirrell. I won't put you in harm's way. We're in this together, aren't we?" Blake reassured him, picking up the smallest bottle. "This is the one. If you want to proceed, you must drink this." He handed the potion to Quirrell, then picked up the last round bottle. "This one's for my return. How can you be so sure? What if you're wrong?" Quirrell questioned, his anxiety palpable. "Do you have a choice, Professor Quirrell?" Blake retorted with a smile. Quirrell glanced at the discarded potion bottles, feeling a mix of anger and despair. The thought of engaging in logical reasoning now seemed absurd with only 2 bottles left. Fearing the consequences of choosing the wrong potion, Quirrell hesitated to open the bottle. "Huh? Are you afraid to drink?" Blake taunted. "Why don't I go first?" The thought of Blake obtaining the Philosopher's Stone before him tightened Quirrell's chest. He couldn't allow Blake to claim the glory after all the risks he had taken. "I'll do it," Quirrell declared, opening the bottle and drinking half of its contents in desperation. The potion's chilling effect confirmed Quirrell's choice. He quickly handed the remaining potion to Blake and stepped through the fire gate first. Blake watched Quirrell's departure with disdain, then looked at the half-drunk potion with disgust. "I don't want to drink what you've touched." He placed the half-empty bottle near the fire gate and returned the untouched bottle to its original spot, ensuring Harry would face a dilemma in choosing the correct potion. As for bypassing the fire without drinking the potion, Blake smirked, revealing his plan. With a flick of his invisibility cloak, he stepped through the flames unscathed, the cloak protecting him from the fire. Upon entering the new room, Blake found himself in a circular chamber with a large mirror at its center. Quirrell was pacing anxiously, a stark contrast to what he had anticipated. Instead of finding the Philosopher's Stone, there was only a mirror. Quirrell's panic was evident. Failing to secure the stone would not only disappoint Dumbledore, but also subject him to his master's wrath. Quirrell's reflection in the mirror only added to his confusion, leaving him to ponder his next move. The expression on his face was one of bewilderment. This mirror is truly peculiar, he thought. Then, in the mirror, he saw himself presenting the Philosopher's Stone to his master, who appeared in his resurrected form, rewarding him. The Death Eaters surrounding them looked on with envy. It was a beautiful vision, but only within the mirror. What about the actual Sorcerer's Stone? At that moment, Quirrell sensed Voldemort's consciousness growing impatient. He quickly drew his wand and began tapping on the mirror, convinced this was Dumbledore's trickery. I must be able to break this, he thought. Blake stood by, observing Quirrell's frantic actions. He touched his nose thoughtfully and slowly approached the mirror, which he recognized as the legendary Mirror of Erasid. This mirror showed viewers their heart's deepest desires. Blake had heard stories of Harry seeing his parents, Ron envisioning himself as a prefect and Quidditch Cup champion, and Dumbledore. Well, Blake wasn't sure what Dumbledore would see. But now, Blake was curious about his own reflection. Quirrell, noticing Blake's approach, felt uneasy. If Blake discovered the Philosopher's Stone, which he had failed to find, Voldemort's attitude towards him would surely worsen. Wait on the side. I will find the Philosopher's Stone. You're too close. It will affect me, Quirrell protested. Blake rolled his eyes, understanding Quirrell's fear. Oh, I don't think I'm in your way, Professor. This mirror, known as the Mirror of Erasid, reflects one's deepest desires. I'm merely curious about my own, Blake retorted. Quirrell, frustrated, suddenly clutched his head in agony. You fool! If you can't find it, let Blake try. Voldemort's raspy voice emanated from Quirrell's head. With a resigned look, Quirrell stepped aside, allowing Blake access to the mirror. Blake scratched his head, his interest piqued not by the Sorcerer's Stone, but by his reflection. As he stood before the mirror, he was surprised to see himself holding the Philosopher's Stone. But the scene was peculiar. The mirror showed him sitting atop a hill made of Philosopher's Stones, the one in his hand shining even brighter. The surroundings in the mirror made Blake hastily cover his nose to stop a nosebleed. This is preposterous. I am a gentleman. Such thoughts are beneath me. This mirror is falsely accusing me, he thought, though a part of him was intrigued to look again. What's wrong with you? Voldemort's voice interrupted Blake's thoughts. Blake, looking rather flustered, replied, Ahem, it's nothing. The mirror just caught me off guard. Voldemort, sensing an opportunity, prepared to take control of Quirrell's body, but at that moment, a sudden flame. The fire gate flickered suddenly, and a figure emerged. You? Harry gasped, his eyes wide with astonishment as he looked at the two individuals before him. Yes, it's us, Blake said, his gaze reluctantly shifting away from the mirror, a mischievous smile playing on his lips. I had a feeling I might encounter you here, Harry Potter. But I thought it was Snape. Harry's voice trailed off, his expression one of shock as he stared at Blake, who seemed so different now. Oh, Snape, that poor man, always taking the blame, Blake said with a hint of mockery. I've told you before, haven't I? Stop focusing on poor old Snape. He's just a man who couldn't find love and suffered at the hands of his enemies. Quirrell joined the conversation, adding, Snape really didn't seem like a nice guy, flitting around like a giant bat. But his presence has been quite beneficial to me. With him around, who would suspect the honest, poor Professor Quirrell? Harry couldn't believe what he was hearing. It couldn't be true. Quirrell was one thing, but Blake was a freshman like himself. He and Hagrid had introduced him to the wizarding world. Blake had even helped him deal with his Uncle Vernon's family, who had bullied him. How could he be a villain and Quirrell? Snape tried to kill me once, but didn't you save me? I saw it in the sky that day. You were helping me, weren't you? Harry protested. Ha! It's quite amusing, really. I was casting a curse to harm you, and Snape was casting the counter-curse to save you. Yet you thought it was Snape who was trying to harm you. Quirrell laughed, beginning the typical villain monologue, revealing too much just before his downfall. As Quirrell indulged in his self-destructive explanation, Blake, seemingly uninvolved, wandered back to the magic mirror. "Sk, how marvelous," he murmured, admiring the divine light emanating from the mirror as he wiped away a dribble of saliva. Then he felt a hard object in his hand. "What? No way. Are you serious?" he exclaimed, his surprise evident. This unexpected turn of events left Harry reeling, struggling to reconcile the actions of Blake and Quirrell with the reality unfolding before him. The revelation that his perceived allies could be foes was a bitter pill to swallow, challenging everything he thought he knew about the wizarding world and those within it. Chapter 177, Blake's Dilemma and Voldemort's Demand. Blake found himself in a state of confusion. The notion of desiring the Philosopher's Stone without intending to use it seemed paradoxical. Initially, Blake had little interest in the stone. Given its potential inheritance and the fact that Nicholas Flamel ultimately chose to destroy it, Blake felt confident in his ability to recreate it if necessary. After all, achieving such a feat would mark the pinnacle of alchemy, and he believed his skills could one day surpass those of Flamel. However, a sudden realization struck him. The idea of acquiring the Philosopher's Stone for the purpose of enhancing it aligned perfectly with his earlier thoughts. This unexpected turn of events led to the stone coming into his possession, deviating from his original plan. Meanwhile, the situation escalated as Quirrell revealed Voldemort, who had been residing on the back of his head, to Harry. The sight of Voldemort's ghastly appearance, with his pale, chalk-like face, bright red eyes, and snake-like nostrils, filled Harry with terror. Voldemort's voice, whispering yet commanding, urged Harry to retrieve the Philosopher's Stone, promising a return to physical form with its power. Harry, however, could not bring himself to comply with Voldemort's demands, especially after Voldemort's cruel taunt about his parents' deaths. Fueled by anger and defiance, Harry declared Voldemort's claims to be lies and refused to be intimidated. Voldemort, growing anxious without the stone, saw Harry as the key to bypassing Dumbledore's protections. Time was of the essence, and Harry's success in obtaining the stone became crucial. As Harry attempted to flee, Quirrell tried to stop him, but it was Blake who acted first. With a swift spell, he bound Harry, preventing his escape. Harry's shock and betrayal were palpable as he confronted Blake, who chillingly dismissed their friendship. Blake's actions and motivations at this moment were complex. Caught between his own plans and the unfolding drama, he had to navigate the dangerous waters of loyalty, power, and the looming threat of Voldemort. The chapter closes on a tense note, leaving readers questioning Blake's true intentions and the fate of Harry Potter. "Are you truly worthy of being my friend?" Harry glared at Blake with eyes that seemed to burst into flames. "Wake up, Harry. You are merely a minor obstacle on my path to greater goals." Ding! Angry emotion detected. Ding! Congratulations to the host for receiving a golden treasure chest. "You traitor! You've betrayed Dumbledore," Harry accused, his voice thick with disbelief. "Betrayal? I'm sorry, but I never swore loyalty to Dumbledore in the first place," Blake retorted with a maniacal grin that unsettled Harry deeply. It was a stark contrast to the past, where even Uncle Vernon's insults towards Dumbledore had angered him. Now Blake himself was disparaging Dumbledore, the very person who had turned Harry's cousin Dudley into a pig for his insolence. "Stop resisting, Harry Potter. Proceed to the mirror and assist the great Dark Lord in undoing Dumbledore's little scheme," Blake commanded coldly. I can't believe you've become this." Harry stammered, his heart sinking. He had braced himself for betrayal from many, but never from Blake. "He restricts me, forbids me from delving into dark magic. Why? Why does he seek to prevent me from gaining strength?" Blake mused aloud, voicing his frustrations. "The Dark Lord offers me power that Dumbledore refuses to. Why shouldn't I seek a new path?" Blake's words were like a dagger to Harry's heart. "Is it the allure of dark magic that tempts you?" Harry asked, desperation coloring his tone. "Yes, so accept your fate. Be a good lad and find the Philosopher's Stone for us," Blake said, waving his wand and magically pulling Harry in front of the magical mirror. Quirrell, too, adjusted his position so that Voldemort's face on the back of his head could directly face Harry. This maneuver positioned John's face towards Blake, who was near the door. Blake, noticing this, flashed a sly smile and casually pretended to adjust his clothing, allowing the magic stone in his pocket to peek out slightly. His footsteps, seemingly casual, moved him closer to the fire gate. Quirrell, still waiting for his master to address Harry, caught sight of the Philosopher's Stone in Blake's pocket. A gleam of realization flashed in his eyes. When had Blake obtained the Philosopher's Stone, and why hadn't he surrendered it to their master? What was Blake planning? Voldemort, possessing Quirrell, missed none of these silent exchanges. The moment Quirrell noticed the Philosopher's Stone, Voldemort understood Blake's intentions. "Blake!" Voldemort's voice boomed, his attention now fully on Blake rather than Harry. The face on the back of Quirrell's head vanished, only to reappear on the front, merging seamlessly with Quirrell's own features. Quirrell was petrified, feeling the full wrath of his master. This takeover was more forceful than any before. Ding! Angry emotion detected. Ding! Congratulations to the host for receiving a golden treasure chest. "Oh, great Dark Lord, what do you wish of me?" Blake asked, feigning ignorance as he took another step towards the door. "Stop, Blake!" Quirrell, now completely under Voldemort's control, raised his wand and aimed it at Blake. Thanks to Blake's earlier contributions, Voldemort's current state was significantly improved compared to his original weakened condition. This possession was a mere trifle to him. "Where do you think you're going with my Philosopher's Stone?" Voldemort sneered. "What are you talking about? Isn't the Philosopher's Stone still within the mirror?" Blake feigned confusion. "How do you know the Philosopher's Stone is in the mirror? I've seen everything, so hand it over," Voldemort demanded, his tone menacing. "Do so, and I might spare you. You won't be held accountable for this transgression." Blake laughed, the sound echoing ominously in the chamber. "Very well, you've seen through my ruse." He then produced the red, crystal-clear Philosopher's Stone from his pocket. "Here it is, as you requested. Now, take it." Voldemort's voice was tinged with excitement as he made a vow. He was convinced that obtaining the Philosopher's Stone would guarantee his successful resurrection. However, he was determined to eliminate Blake, who had daringly turned against him. Despite considering Blake a potential ally, Voldemort's tolerance for betrayal was non-existent. Blake, unfazed, faced Voldemort with a smirk. He confidently returned the Philosopher's Stone to his pocket. "Why should I hand over the Philosopher's Stone, which I acquired through my own efforts, to you?" he challenged. Voldemort, struggling to contain his fury, attempted to negotiate. "Just give me the Philosopher's Stone, and I can be resurrected. Then I'll teach you any powerful dark magic you desire. You know I've always recognized your magical talent. Besides, don't you wish to uncover the secret to eternal life?" Blake laughed dismissively. "Do you really think I'm unaware? I've already plundered your family's knowledge. I've mastered all the dark magic you know. What more could you possibly teach me?" Voldemort, barely holding back his anger, pressed on. "Even if my dark magic no longer interests you, surely the secret of immortality does?" With a sneer, Blake patted his pocket. "What do you think I just secured in my pocket? With the Philosopher's Stone, the elixir of life is within easy reach. Why would I need your so-called secrets of eternal life? Has your brain been addled by that oversized turban?" Voldemort, unable to contain his rage any longer, bellowed, "Blake, you're courting death! If you were at the height of your power, perhaps I might fear you. But in your current state, resembling a ghost, why should I?" Blake's taunts were merciless. Voldemort was incensed. Blake had not only stolen his family's knowledge, but now threatened his chance at resurrection. It was always Voldemort who used others before discarding them. The notion of being used and then cast aside was intolerable. "Die, Avada Kedavra!" Voldemort unleashed the killing curse with pure hatred. However, the curse's power was diminished, channeled through Quirrell's frail body. Blake casually waved his wand, summoning a small silver alchemy shield. The shield intercepted the curse, leaving only a minor mark without causing any significant impact. "Is that all? Tom, are you trying to tickle me?" Blake taunted, using Voldemort's despised birth name. Voldemort was beyond furious. "Blake, you think I can't kill you?" He launched another killing curse. Ding! Angry emotions detected. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a supreme treasure chest. Blake was thrilled, having provoked Voldemort intentionally to achieve this outcome. Yet, he remained vigilant, continuing to deflect Voldemort's curses with his shield. The exchange wasn't just about surviving Voldemort's attacks. It was about pushing him further, knowing well that a supreme treasure chest was not the only reward worth pursuing. You call yourself the Dark Lord with such feeble attempts? Had I been born earlier, what would have become of you? You can't even breach my defenses. Is that all you've got? Try harder. Did you skip your meal? Oh, did you forget to eat that little hamburger I gave you? Wasn't it to your taste? Don't give me that look. It does contain some unsavory ingredients. Meanwhile, Harry sat on the ground, completely bewildered. Moments ago, it seemed as though Blake and Voldemort were allies. Now, they were locked in combat. Despite Voldemort's aggressive stance, he couldn't even graze Blake's clothing. Harry couldn't help but wonder if Voldemort was merely a facade, a threatening appearance with no substance behind it. Voldemort was on the brink of madness, his fury reaching its peak. He had thought that by taking control of his own body, he could outmaneuver Blake. However, he hadn't accounted for the weakness of Quirrell's body, which he was currently inhabiting. Quirrell's deteriorating health was a constant source of frustration for Voldemort, who realized that if he couldn't overpower Blake soon, he would be utterly drained. In a moment of desperation, Voldemort prepared to unleash the Fiendfire curse. It was at this critical juncture that the incessant beeping of the system notifications finally ceased. Ding! Angry emotions detected. Ding! It is detected that the target's treasure chest drop has reached the upper limit today. Ding! This target will no longer drop any treasure chests today. Seizing the opportunity, Blake dropped his pretense and opened a dimensional door, teleporting directly beside Harry, narrowly evading a killing curse from Voldemort. Voldemort, witnessing magic he had never seen before, was momentarily stunned. This brief hesitation cost him the perfect chance to cast the Fiendfire curse. Blake took advantage of Voldemort's shock, lifting his leg and delivering a swift kick to Harry's rear. "Tom, look at the hidden weapon," he shouted as Harry was propelled forward with a yelp of pain. The impact was not only physically painful for Harry, but also intensified the pain in his scar, which seemed to throb more painfully the closer Voldemort was. Harry, propelled by Blake's kick, collided with Voldemort, causing both of them to tumble to the ground. In the chaos, Harry's hand accidentally pressed against Quirrell's face, where Voldemort's presence was strongest. The contact caused Quirrell's skin to blister and burn as if scalded by boiling water. Despite the excruciating headache this contact induced in Harry, he did not let go. Just as Harry was about to relent, he felt a tearing sensation and looked up to see Professor Dumbledore rushing to his aid. "Professor Dumbledore! Quick! The Philosopher's Stone! Blake!" Harry's plea trailed off as he caught sight of Blake, who had taken a rather unconventional approach with the Philosopher's Stone, treating it like a piece of candy. "Well, strawberry," Blake commented nonchalantly. Harry's vision blurred and he fainted, overwhelmed by the absurdity of the situation and the pain from his scar. This encounter showcased not only the desperation of Voldemort, trapped in a weakening body, but also the unpredictable and resourceful nature of Blake. The chaotic battle, filled with unexpected turns and bizarre tactics, highlighted the ingenuity and resilience of the young wizards facing the Dark Lord. Chapter 178. I report that Voldemort has created more than one Horcrux. A spectral face, resembling a visage crafted from white steam, suddenly materialized in midair. It surged forward, its ethereal form darting towards the wall with alarming speed. "Blake!" the face bellowed in a frenzy. "Sooner or later, I will ensure you meet your demise before my very eyes." Avada Kedavra! A jet of green light pierced through the apparition. The spectral face emitted a harrowing scream, its form visibly diminishing as if the white steam itself was being eroded. With a final wail, the face vanished into the wall, leaving no trace behind. Dumbledore's brow furrowed as the apparition disappeared. He swiftly turned his attention back to Harry, who lay unconscious in his arms. After a brief moment of examination, Dumbledore's expression softened. Harry appeared to have merely fainted, showing no signs of serious injury. For a fleeting second, Dumbledore had feared the worst, especially considering the ominous prophecy that foretold a confrontation between Voldemort and the Savior, without specifying which would fall. Relief washed over him. Harry was unharmed, a sign that the tide might be turning in their favor. This encounter with Voldemort could only be deemed the initial skirmish in a much larger conflict. Blake, meanwhile, had lowered his wand, his experiment concluded. The results were clear. Although Voldemort's existence was tethered to his Horcruxes, rendering him immortal, the killing curse still inflicted significant damage on his disembodied form. The attack had drained all the magical energy Blake had recovered from his secret endeavors, effectively setting Voldemort's plans back significantly. This hardly counts as a victory, Blake mused as he approached Quirrell's body, using his wand to manipulate the corpse. Dumbledore, concerned, inquired about Harry's condition. "Oh, Harry's just a bit overzealous," Blake quipped, his tone light despite the gravity of the situation. A mere touch to Quirrell's face caused a piece of it to crumble away, revealing the extent of the damage Harry's counterattack had inflicted. "Is this the protective power of love's magic?" Blake pondered aloud, genuinely awestruck. "Did you witness that apparition just now?" he asked, referring to the spectral face. Dumbledore, regaining his composure, nodded gravely. "It appears I've overlooked something crucial," he admitted, his voice heavy with the weight of his realization. "So, your plan has failed," Blake ventured, noting the weariness in Dumbledore's tone. "It seems so," Dumbledore conceded. "I must uncover the reason behind Voldemort's survival before devising a new strategy. This setback was not what I had anticipated. Lawler, despite Blake's risky infiltration and Harry's narrow escape, we've only managed to repel Voldemort temporarily." Blake, sensing Dumbledore's contemplation, subtly inquired, "Have you considered why he remains unvanquished?" Dumbledore sighed deeply. "Not yet, but I am determined to find out." Unbeknownst to Dumbledore, Blake was silently contemplating the Philosopher's Stone, wondering whether Dumbledore was intentionally concealing the truth about the Horcruxes, or if he genuinely hadn't considered them yet. Suddenly, the door burst open, admitting a group of concerned individuals. Leading the procession was Snape, wand at the ready and expression grim, followed by a visibly shocked Professor McGonagall. Madame Pomfrey, carrying a medical kit, and a terrified Ronald Weasley entered next. Ronald's expression suggested he feared the worst for his friend. Madame Pomfrey, upon witnessing Quirrell's charred remains, gasped in horror, yet her professional instincts quickly took over, and she turned her attention to Harry. After a thorough examination, she stood, relieved. "Merlin's beard. It's fortunate that Harry is unharmed," she declared, noting only a minor injury. Blake, feeling somewhat sheepish, rubbed his nose. The injury in question was his doing, a rather forceful kick. Admittedly, the harm Blake had inflicted on Harry that night, both physically and mentally, surpassed even Voldemort's. Meeting Dumbledore's gaze, Blake offered an awkward smile, silently acknowledging the complexity of their situation. "For the greater good, cough cuff, for the sake of your plan, I can't help but agree." Dumbledore suddenly heard the familiar phrases, his beard twitching slightly. He sighed, a sense of resignation in his voice. "Miss Pomfrey, with your care and Severus potion, Harry will be just fine," he said, acknowledging Snape's nod before the man turned to leave. "Don't worry, with Severus's potion, the boy will indeed recover," Madame Pomfrey stated confidently. Dumbledore nodded in agreement, then turned to Blake. "Please, head to my office first and wait for me there. You know the password." As Dumbledore spoke, he carefully picked up Harry, making his way towards the school infirmary. When he finally returned to the door of his office, it was well past midnight, and he regretted having Blake wait for so long, especially considering the late hour and their recent ordeal. Even he felt the weight of exhaustion. Surely Blake, who had just faced Voldemort, felt it even more. However, upon entering his office, Dumbledore was surprised to find the scene quite different from what he had anticipated. Instead of finding Blake asleep on the couch as expected, Dumbledore was greeted by a lively scene. Blake was energetically interacting with Fawkes, attempting to teach the Phoenix to speak. "I'll give you dried fish. What should you say?" Blake coaxed, expecting a thank you in return, only to correct himself and prompt Fawkes again. Dumbledore couldn't help but interject. "Fawkes is a phoenix, not a parrot, You can't teach it to talk. Blake turned, noticing Dumbledore's tired expression. I think the first person who tried to teach a parrot to talk must have been told the same thing, Blake mused. But in the end, they were right. A parrot is a bird, and it can indeed learn to speak. So, trying something new is always worth the honor, isn't it? As Dumbledore sat down, he noticed a glass of iced pumpkin juice waiting for him, full sugar and chilled. I thought you might need this, Blake said, showing a thoughtful gesture that warmed Dumbledore's heart. Thank you, Blake, for being so considerate, Dumbledore said, taking a sip of the juice. He then reflected on the events of the night, admitting his preoccupation with the prophecy and the plan, and how it blinded him to the immediate dangers they faced. Seeing Harry unconscious and you fighting Voldemort made me realize the folly of my ways, Dumbledore confessed. Blake responded with a level tone, for the greater good, cough, for this era of peace, sacrifices must be made. If someone has to make a sacrifice, it might as well be me. Dumbledore was taken aback by Blake's understanding and comfort. I didn't expect to find solace in your words, he admitted with a wry smile. Let's focus on tonight's events, Blake suggested, steering the conversation towards the pressing issue. We need to understand why Voldemort isn't dead. Otherwise, no matter how many times we defeat him, he'll keep coming back. Dumbledore shared his suspicions. I have a theory, but I need more information to confirm it. I have a theory as well, Blake said, catching Dumbledore's interest. Horcruxes. Dumbledore was surprised. You know about Horcruxes? Yes, I've read about them in books, Blake admitted, though he didn't mention that his knowledge came from a previous life, not from any book that Dumbledore might be aware of. After making a mental note about Grindelwald, Blake turned the conversation towards a more pressing matter. You know, I've been thinking, it might actually be a Horcrux, he said thoughtfully. But I'm not entirely certain yet. Did you uncover any clues at his place before? Dumbledore inquired, his interest piqued. I believe so, Blake replied. Remember what I mentioned to you before? He once boasted to me, claiming he had ventured further on the path to immortality than anyone else. And tonight I targeted his soul with a killing curse. Normally, even a specter would be obliterated by such a curse, yet his condition was far worse than that of any ghost, but he only sustained minor injuries and managed to escape. It's inexplicable unless... Dumbledore's brow furrowed in concern. Unless he has indeed created a Horcrux. The realization of Voldemort possibly having made Horcruxes was troubling. To truly defeat Voldemort, they would need to find and destroy these Horcruxes. However, a Horcrux could be anything, a stone, a magical creature, making the task of identifying and locating Voldemort's Horcruxes akin to searching for a needle in a haystack. Observing Dumbledore's deepened thought, Blake didn't hold back on further unsettling revelations. If we consider the historical records, if they are accurate, it's evident that Voldemort's methods in his early years differed drastically from his later, more reckless behavior. Such a significant shift in temperament suggests that his soul may have been split more than once. Dumbledore stood up suddenly, alarmed by the implication. Are you suggesting Voldemort could have created multiple Horcruxes? It's highly probable, Blake confirmed. In the time I've spent observing him, it's clear he values his life above all. Immortality is his ultimate goal, and he wouldn't settle for a single Horcrux if multiple could offer him greater security. Dumbledore, who had watched Voldemort's rise with keen interest, understood the gravity of Blake's theory. This is indeed troubling, he sighed, sinking back into his chair. The task of finding and destroying Voldemort's Horcruxes seemed insurmountable. However, Blake, aware of the existence of all the Horcruxes, was not as disheartened. Actually, we do have a clue, he offered. Dumbledore looked up, eager for any lead. You know the identity of a Horcrux? Blake hesitated, not ready to reveal everything just yet. He had a hunch that Ravenclaw's diadem played a significant role. For now, we can't pinpoint the exact Horcruxes, but we can approach this from Voldemort's perspective. Knowing him as well as you do, if you were Voldemort, what would you choose to encase your soul in? And where would you hide it? Dumbledore's eyes sparkled with a renewed sense of purpose. Tom was exceedingly arrogant. He would never settle for an ordinary object to house his soul. And as for the hiding places, Considering he views his Horcruxes as treasures, he wouldn't hide them just anywhere. If I were Voldemort, I'd choose a concealed location and protect it with formidable magic. Blake smiled, encouraged by Dumbledore's insight. Exactly, and after he became Voldemort, it would be unthinkable for him to choose anything less than extraordinary for his Horcruxes and their hiding places. Dumbledore rose to his feet, his eyes twinkling with a newfound sense of hope. Blake, had it not been for your reminder, I might not have come to this realization until it was far too late, he said, his voice filled with sincere gratitude. Thank you. Suddenly, a chime resonated in the air, as if marking the significance of the moment. An emotion of extreme gratitude and joy has been detected, announced an unseen presence. Following closely, another chime sounded, Congratulations to the host for receiving a golden treasure chest. The room seemed to hold its breath, the atmosphere charged with anticipation and the promise of newfound possibilities. Chapter 179, Blake, I Can Explain. Harry felt himself sinking into darkness, his mind in a daze. As he blinked, a ray of sunshine caught his eye, gradually bringing the world into focus. And then he saw him. Blake, Harry exclaimed, sitting up abruptly. Where are you? Where's Professor Dumbledore? Memories flooded back, Dumbledore before everything went black, and then the betrayal. Blake, in front of both him and Voldemort, consuming the Philosopher's Stone, a betrayal to both Dumbledore and Voldemort. Was the Philosopher's Stone actually edible? Did this mean Blake was now immortal? But now wasn't the time for such thoughts. What did you do to Professor Dumbledore? Harry demanded. Blake jumped, his reaction almost comical. You've got to keep your voice down, or Madame Pomfrey will have me thrown out. Harry's heart skipped a beat, nearly tumbling off the bed in shock. Madame Pomfrey? Am I still at Hogwarts? Blake spread his hands in a gesture of obviousness. Where else did you think you were? You're in the Hogwarts hospital wing. You betrayed Dumbledore, didn't you? Harry's voice trembled. Blake sighed, scratching his head awkwardly. I thought Dumbledore would have explained. This is rather embarrassing. Harry was relentless. But you ate the Philosopher's Stone, Blake attempted to clarify. I was undercover, placed by Professor Dumbledore, to stay close to Professor Quirrell. But you ate the Philosopher's Stone. Harry interrupted, his frustration palpable. The image of Blake consuming the stone, to the dismay of both him and Voldemort, was vivid in his mind. Harry couldn't easily dismiss his own failure to protect the stone, nor could he readily accept Blake's explanation. Blake, trying to maintain his patience, was interrupted yet again by Harry's accusations and threats of exposure. The tension escalated until Blake, unable to contain his anger, threatened Harry in a manner most unbecoming of an undercover agent. However, Harry, now intimidated, chose not to interrupt again. I repeat, I'm an undercover agent, Blake stated firmly. Dumbledore assigned me to monitor Professor Quirrell. As for the Philosopher's Stone that I ate. He then produced a glowing red object from his pocket and abruptly placed it in Harry's mouth. Harry, in shock, prepared to spit it out, only to pause in confusion. Strawberry? He questioned, removing the object. It was a large piece of strawberry-flavored hard candy, shaped like the Philosopher's Stone. You see? Blake's voice was softer now, but still serious. The Philosopher's Stone you saw that night was a fake. The real one is hidden elsewhere. A secret known only to Nicholas Flamel, his wife, you, me, and Dumbledore. If this secret ever gets out. Harry, still processing the revelation, looked at Blake with a mix of fear and curiosity. The realization that the events of that night were not as they seemed began to dawn on him, opening up a flood of questions about trust, deception, and the lengths to which they must go to protect the magical world's most powerful secrets. Blake spoke with a firm tone. Then, if someone else leaks it, I'll sew their mouth shut too. Harry's mouth twitched slightly at Blake's expression. You're so reasonable, he muttered, though his tone dripped with sarcasm. Blake, ignoring Harry's resentful stare, recounted the events of that night, leaving it up to Harry to believe him or not. Once Blake finished, an eerie silence enveloped the room. Do you have any more questions? Blake asked, ready to leave. He felt Dumbledore's decision to have him explain things to Harry was rather hasty. Wait. Harry, still harboring doubts about Blake, was also deeply curious about what had transpired after he fell into a coma. How long was I in the hospital? You were in a coma for 3 days, Blake replied, and because you missed the last game, Team Gryffindor was defeated by Team Ravenclaw. He remembered Cho Chang's excitement after catching the snitch, how she flew directly into the stands to give him a big hug, thanking him for the flying tips he had given her. Harry, after a moment of silence, asked the question that intrigued him the most. I mean, is he who must not be named dead? Just call him Voldemort, or actually, I recommend you call him Tom, Blake suggested with a smirk. Calling him Tom would really irritate him. Tom? Harry repeated, hearing Voldemort's real name for the first time. Yes, Tom Riddle. That's Voldemort's real name, Blake clarified. As for whether Tom is dead, the answer is no. He escaped right under Dumbledore's and my nose. My spell struck his soul, but didn't mortally wound him. So he must be hiding somewhere now, waiting for his next move. Things are far from over, Harry. But this time, you're not alone. We're all on his hit list, and he wants me dead even more than you. Harry nodded, then asked, What about Professor Quirrell? Quirrell's dead. Tom fled quickly and didn't bother with his so-called servant, Blake answered. After a brief pause, Harry hesitantly asked another question. Voldemort said he killed my mother because she prevented him from killing me. So, why did he want to kill me? Blake hesitated, unsure if he should reveal the truth, but decided that Harry deserved to know. The truth can be heavy, he warned. Are you sure you're ready to accept it? Harry nodded firmly, eager for answers. Blake touched his chin thoughtfully. What I know comes from Dumbledore, and it's not much. It all starts with a prophecy. Tom learned of a prophecy stating that he would be defeated by a child born at the end of July. To prevent this, he sought to kill any newborn of wizarding families born at that time. And you, Harry, were that child. Harry looked at Blake in shock. So, he wanted me dead over a prophecy? Tom is terrified of death. He believed you could end his reign, so he sought to kill you. Yet, in trying to kill you, he essentially fulfilled the prophecy. This proves that the prophecy wasn't illusory after all. Harry lowered his head, puzzled. But why? I mean, how was he defeated by me? Blake finally smiled, breaking the heavy silence. To understand this, we must delve into a very special kind of magic, he began. The magic of love, he continued, his voice softening. Your mother's sacrifice for you was profound. Her love didn't just leave a mark on you. It was more than a physical scar. It was an invisible shield. Unknowingly, she bestowed upon you a powerful amulet, Harry. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. This ancient protective magic turned Voldemort's curse back upon him. That's the very reason Quirrell couldn't bear your touch. Your mother's love was repelling him. Harry remained silent, absorbing the information, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. Blake noticed the change in his demeanor, the redness around his eyes signaling a storm of emotions. Breaking the silence, Harry's voice was barely above a whisper. The invisibility cloak. Do you know who gave it to me for Christmas? Oh, yes, Blake replied, a hint of warmth returning to his voice. Professor Dumbledore himself told me he was the one who gave you the cloak. He believed it would aid you on your journey. Harry's head snapped up, a spark of realization in his eyes. So, if Dumbledore gave me the invisibility cloak, he began, piecing the puzzle together, does that mean he was guiding me all along, leading me to uncover the Philosopher's Stone and to confront Voldemort? Blake watched Harry closely, seeing the gears turning in the young wizard's mind. The conversation had taken a turn, revealing the layers of guidance and manipulation woven into Harry's path. The revelation of Dumbledore's involvement in his life was a piece of the larger puzzle, hinting at the depth of the headmaster's plans and the role Harry played in the battle against darkness. Chapter 180, Grindelwald. I am so poor that all I have left is money. Do you really think it was Dumbledore who guided you through all of this? Blake inquired, his tone suggesting a deeper layer of meaning. Not entirely, Blake responded, his gaze thoughtful. Dumbledore is a fascinating individual. It seems to me he simply wanted to offer you an opportunity, Blake continued, observing Harry's reaction closely. As the headmaster of Hogwarts, he's well aware of the events within the school's walls. He must have had a clear understanding of your intentions, Blake said, leaning forward slightly. And rather than hindering your investigation, he provided you with an invisibility cloak to aid you. I believe he thought you deserved the chance to face Voldemort. He presented you with a choice, Blake concluded, watching Harry closely. After a moment of silence, Harry nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place in his mind. Dumbledore had never explicitly directed him. All his actions had been of his own volition. Investigating the Philosopher's Stone, seeking out Nicholas Flamel, scrutinizing Snape, all had been his own decisions, uncoerced. Dumbledore's role had been that of a subtle guide, returning his father's invisibility cloak among other small aids. Noticing Harry's contemplative silence, Blake stood up. I understand you may still harbor doubts about me, he began, his tone neutral. But whether you misunderstand my intentions is of little concern to me, Harry. Like you, I weighed all possible outcomes before making my decision, Blake said, his expression serious. And given another chance, I would still act on my own initiative. For the greater good, Blake added, his voice carrying a hint of resolve as he took a few steps towards the door, only to pause and turn back. He handed Harry a beautifully bound book. Almost forgot. Hagrid asked me to give this to you, he said, a touch of sympathy in his voice. Poor Hagrid still blames himself for his past mistakes. He believes he committed an unforgivable error because of a dragon egg that nearly cost you your life. Blake suggested gently that Harry might consider reaching out to Hagrid after leaving the hospital. Harry nodded, his attention turning to the book in his hands. As he opened it, his eyes immediately welled up with tears. Inside was a photo album filled with images of wizards and witches, all smiling and waving at him. Among them were his parents, James and Lily Potter. At that moment, Madame Pomfrey entered, carrying a large glass of potion. Noticing Harry's emotional state, she sighed softly. Poor child. Though it might not be my place to say, you should be feeling somewhat uplifted right now. After you drink this potion, make sure to rest well, she advised, her tone gentle. Blake, who had been observing quietly, wrinkled his nose at the potion and frowned. I'll take my leave now, but perhaps you should add a bar of chocolate to that potion, he suggested with a smirk. It'll make it taste much better. As Blake exited the ward, he encountered Snape, whose expression was as sour as if he were deeply in debt. Snape's sneer was unmistakable. Dumbledore mentioned your proficiency in potions, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. But it appears that might just be an overstatement. Blake chuckled, unbothered. I'm well aware of the effects of adding chocolate to that potion, he admitted. Harry will likely end up with an upset stomach. Still, I suspect he'll be thankful for the suggestion, Blake continued, his smile widening. He'd prefer a brief discomfort over consuming a potion that tastes vile. Your habit of deliberately making potions unpalatable is quite childish, Snape, Blake remarked, his tone mocking. Snape responded with a cold snort. While my potions may taste foul, there are ways to mitigate that without resorting to ingredients that cause adverse reactions. So you're not claiming ignorance, then? Snape challenged, his gaze sharp. Blake returned the cold snort, stepping past Snall. Of course I'm aware. A bit of licorice would suffice. But the boy irked me earlier. It's only fair to teach him a small lesson, wouldn't you agree? Heh, I had thought you more magnanimous. Snape sneered once more. Perhaps you should adopt a better attitude, Professor Snape, Blake retorted, his voice cool. Otherwise, I can't guarantee the quality of the potion I might offer you next time, especially if it involves someone you admire and your adversary. In the midst of a dreamlike deep communication, Snape's face turned an ashen shade of green. You, how dare you? He spluttered. Why wouldn't I dare? As you've pointed out, I'm stingy, came the retort. I apologize to you. Snape gritted his teeth, the tension almost causing his back molars to shatter. The thought crossed his mind. If Blake had indeed tampered with the draught of living death, the consequences could be dire. Snape's concern was not unfounded. Such a prank could lead to catastrophic results. Having fulfilled his promise to Dumbledore, Blake awaited Harry's awakening to clarify the situation, a task he found exceedingly mundane. With this matter resolved, Blake made his way toward the room of requirement, a sigh of relief escaping him. During his time, he had amassed a significant collection of treasure chests, 1 supreme treasure chest, 2 diamond treasure chests, and 7 golden treasure chests. He had chosen not to open them yet. Opting to wait for the completion of a luck potion, he had been brewing in the room of requirement. The imminent completion of this potion was the reason for his patience. After all, the contents of the chests could be vastly improved with a bit of luck. As Blake approached the teaching building, intending to ascend the stairs, he was intercepted by Baker, the house elf. "The old master has heard of the young master's newfound freedom and wishes to meet with you," Baker conveyed. Blake rubbed his nose thoughtfully. Grindelwald's desire for a meeting was not unexpected, yet Blake was surprised by his patience. It seemed Grindelwald was keen to avoid crossing paths with Dumbledore for the time being. This meeting, Blake surmised, must have either been approved by Dumbledore or tacitly allowed. "Let's go, then," Blake decided, his curiosity piqued not only by the luck potion, but also by the prospect of meeting the infamous Dark Lord. "Please, little master, hold my hand," Baker requested, his tone betraying his relief at Blake's willingness to meet Grindelwald. Despite Grindelwald's notorious reputation, Blake had accepted the invitation without hesitation. The sensation of apparating with a house elf was surprisingly pleasant, lacking the discomfort typically associated with wizard apparition. In the blink of an eye, Blake found himself in a different location, a mansion that epitomized the pinnacle of luxury. Standing at the entrance to the living room, Blake observed a gray-haired man seated on a sofa, his back to him. As Blake approached, the man stood and turned around. His hair was unkempt, but he wore a finely tailored suit. Grindelwald greeted Blake with a broad smile. "Welcome home, boy." "Home?" Blake echoed, surveying the grandeur of the mansion. "Yes, only a mansion of this caliber is worthy of being called home, don't you think?" Grindelwald boasted. Blake chuckled. "I didn't expect you to be so competitive at your age." Grindelwald's cheeks tinged with a hint of red. "Heh, am I?" "Both of us know that a home is defined by its inhabitants, not whether it's a mansion or a humble wooden shack," Blake remarked, settling comfortably onto the plush sofa. Grindelwald's attempt to impress was clear. He had constructed a mansion far more luxurious than Dumbledore's ancestral home, hoping to showcase his power and perhaps persuade Blake to leave Godric's Hollow. However, Blake remained unswayed by these material displays, understanding that the true essence of home lay elsewhere. This realization left Grindelwald pondering his approach, as it became evident that external gra and dare held little allure for Blake. Feeling slightly disoriented, Blake watched as a steaming teacup gracefully floated towards him, settling gently into his hands. Devor resumed his seat, and the atmosphere shifted as Grindelwald spoke with a hint of nostalgia. "This is our first face-to-face meeting." Blake nodded in agreement. Their previous interactions had been limited to exchanging messages through communication notes and books. This physical meeting offered a new dimension to their acquaintance. Grindelwald, contrary to Blake's preconceived notions, did not exude the domineering aura he had expected. In fact, he seemed less imposing than Dumbledore at his most serious, resembling more an approachable, easygoing neighbor. Sensing Blake's thoughts, Grindelwald inquired, "After seeing me, do you feel a bit disappointed?" "I'm not disappointed, just surprised. You're different from what I had envisioned," Blake admitted, choosing honesty over pretense. This candidness seemed to please Grindelwald, who found comfort in Blake's natural demeanor and lack of resistance. Blake's presence felt so at home, as if he were conversing with a long-lost father. Indeed, in a way, Grindelwald was a father figure to him. Blake, curious about their location, placed his half-finished teacup down. "This place, it's not far from Hogwarts, is it?" Given that Blake had managed to apparate in, it suggested their proximity to the school. "Yes, it's quite close," Grindelwald confirmed. "I acquired this property specifically for our meeting. You see, I don't own much real estate in England anymore." Blake's expression of curiosity prompted Grindelwald to explain further. "Ah, I see what you're wondering. Yes, they did confiscate most of my assets. Even my funds in Gringotts were claimed by those greedy goblins. However, they had no jurisdiction over my properties in the Muggle world." With a wry smile, Grindelwald observed Blake's astonishment before adding, "Though time has eroded much of my health, I find myself in a peculiar state of poverty where all I have left is money." This revelation painted a complex picture of Grindelwald's current circumstances, highlighting the stark contrast between his diminished physical state and his remaining wealth. hidden away from the magical world's reach.